Prologue: Owen sat in one of the waiting room's many reinforced chairs and flipped through an old Capes and Cowls magazine. It detailed the rise of one of the latest crops of heroes fresh off their internships and making quite a splash in the world. Their costumes were crisp, their dialogue concise, their images squeaky clean. These were the kind of wholesome, homespun moral warriors that would take the lead in creating a new world free of immorality. These were the kind of heroes the world needed more of, or at least that's the idea the reporter espoused. It would have been vastly more impressive if Owen didn't know that two of the featured four were already dead. He'd heard one was in rehab upstate, and though the final member was still active, she wasn't quite so eager or wholesome anymore. She certainly didn't schedule in time for op-ed pieces with interviewers. Now she just focused on getting the job done. That was the trouble with old magazines. Media darlings rarely lived up to their initial hype, and for the ones who did, the eventual fall just became all the more catastrophic. Owen had just set the magazine down when the door a few feet away flew open. A muscular man younger than Owen stepped out. He wore a bright red costume with yellow trim, a matching mask, and a cape that fell to just above his calves. Owen hoped this kid was a flyer or a strong man, otherwise someone was going to make him regret that fluttering fashion choice. A couple of steps behind the costumed kid was another man, this one older, shorter, and sporting a significant paunch instead of a body rippling with muscle. "Don't worry about a thing, you just go on home and relax," the smaller man assured the larger. "We'll get this whole mess cleaned up and fixed before you can say bam pifzo." The costumed hero nodded his head and set off through the waiting room. His gaze lingered on Owen for a moment, the spark of recognition flickering through his eyes. Almost immediately dismissed. No way, couldn't be him. Must be a new guy who is a fan paying homage with the outfit. He walked through the door without another glance. This man had more worrisome things on the brain. "Good to see you, Lenny." Owen rose from the chair and towered over the smaller man. From here he could see Lenny's prominent bald spot. A different person might have gone for a toupee or a comb over or tried some radical drug to fix such vain failings. Not Lenny. He spent every day around people who were physically superior to him. If his ego were wrapped up in his looks, it would have hanged itself long ago. "My stars, look at you," Lenny muttered, taking in the massive form looming over him. He'd have almost sworn it was a few decades ago. And this was the same fresh-faced newbie who was hot out of the HCP. Same chiseled frame, same red shirt and jeans, same dark wavy hair, same bright mask. The most notable differences were under the mask, though, a crooked smile that wasn't as carefree, the stubble of a working man who didn't have time to shave, tired green eyes that lacked the luster and hope of a new hero that might have worried others in Lenny's field. But personally he preferred his clients with the shine wiped off. They'd learned they weren't invincible, and they made smarter choices. Because of that, genetics is bullshit, Lenny said at last. "I bet you don't even have to watch what you eat." "Not really, no. Hell, my doctor has me eating whole wheat and cheese curd every day for breakfast. Do you know what it takes to make that crap taste good?" "No, what? Damned if I have a clue." I was genuinely asking. "Enough, John," in the waiting room. "Let's go to the office." It was strangely comforting how little Lenny's office had changed since Owen left the hero world. The tacky decor, the oversized filing cabinets, the weathered globe that turned into a bar when you swiveled it, all of it was still there. What had changed were the posters on the walls. Lenny always kept his brightest stars up, the hot tickets constantly on display so that everyone who came in knew the kind of clientele this man catered to. A few of the posters were even framed. These were the ones that weren't coming down the heroes Lenny considered legendary. Owen only knew of one framed poster Lenny had taken off the wall, and he didn't hold it against the smaller man one bit. "So," Lenny said once he was situated behind his desk, "you want to come back to the life?" Owen smiled. He'd forgotten the way Lenny referred to working the hero, seeing the life. It was actually a pretty apt phrasing. Being a hero wasn't a 9 to 5. It dominated every aspect of who someone was, even the parts they might wish it didn't. "Yeah, I do." Lenny ran a hand through his ever-thinning hair. "Listen, Titan, you know I never held the whole fiasco against you. Shit happens. If it didn't, I'd likely be out of a job." That said, time does not heal all wounds as far as public perception is concerned. Owen appreciated Lenny trying to be diplomatic, skirting the details and not outright referring to what had happened as the Titan scandal. As it had gone down in history still, it was an unnecessary nicety. They both knew what had happened, as did a vast majority of the nation, if not the world titan, the world-famous hero. With a family man image had been caught by a hidden camera, having sex with another hero, bad as that might have been on its own. What had compounded the issue was the fact that Titan's partner in the scandal tower wasn't. Female infidelity was one thing, but closeted homosexuality, especially in those days, it had led to a fall from grace that was more akin to a plummet. What little of the Titan reputation that remained was almost entirely due to the effort of Lenny. Heroes didn't need agents, technically speaking, any more than a cook needs butter to create a nutritionally sound meal. However, most quickly found out that having a job in the public eye led to a lot of pressure, and people like Lenny made everything flow a lot more smoothly. He was a confidant, a fixer, a PR virtuoso, and a damage control specialist, all heaped into a single roly-poly package. Still, even Lenny had his limits, as Owen had learned firsthand. That's okay, I know I'm not going to be walking back to a warm reception. You always did have a knack for understatement. Lenny said they'll come after you hard. A lot of people took what happened really personally, and there is nothing they'd love more than a chance to tear you apart. I know, believe me, Lenny, no one knows better than me how hated I am. If only you were just hated. I can work with. We play you as a gruff counterpart to some guy whose image can tolerate it, do a turnaround over time, and presto, you're golden again. No, you're hated and held up as an icon by different groups. That gets people fighting, bickering really about some deeply held beliefs. When you've got one man with two different images, you can't shift one without impacting the other. I can deal with that, of course. You can, you're fucking Titan. But not so long ago, this was enough to make you hang up the mask. Thankfully, your certification never expires, but getting you re-licensed for hero work will be a bear after so long, not to mention the headaches I'll get once the media gets a hold of it. Now we go way back, and I like you, so that shit I'm willing to wade through, but only if you can convince me that I won't do it, only to see you walk off again 3 months later. What's changed? Owen sat silently for a few moments, his giant frame hunched in on itself. My sons came to see me a few months ago. Oh yeah, this stays quiet, Lenny, dead quiet, because if you think I'm a PR shitstorm, you have no idea what kind of hellhole they would open. Roy and Herschel are in the HCP themselves now, and doing pretty good from what I hear. I didn't think the HCP took powers. They don't. Holy shit. Lenny turned and popped open his bar, poured himself a healthy measure of vodka over ice in motion for his prospective client to continue. Anyway, Roy was having trouble getting his ability to the next step, so Herschel hunted me down. I took a week, got them on the right path, then asked them to keep in touch. I'll spare you the finer points of the conversation, but they essentially told me to go fuck myself. Look, hurt feelings can run deep, especially at that age. See, that's the thing, Lenny. I don't think they were just hurt. I think they were right. Why should either one want to talk to me? Why should they care? I walked out on their mother, and them reasons be damned, I still did it. I could have made more of an effort. I could have tried to stay in some part of their life. I fucked up. I let my own shit get in the way of people who needed me. That's a hard truth to accept, but I faced it. Unfortunately, that was when it occurred to me I had only scratched the surface on people I abandoned. Lenny could already see where this was going. Titan, come on, you're strong, but there are other heroes on the job. It isn't about that, Lenny. It's about the fact that I could be out there, I could be helping people and making a difference, and instead I holed up in Colorado to lick my wounds. I missed out on the opportunity to be a real father, and I know I'm never going to be an A-list hero from a popularity point of view, but I think it's time I stopped running away. I'm a strong man. We hit, and we get hit. It's time for me to finally shake off that last one and start moving again. Lenny sighed. Shit, Titan, why couldn't you give those kinds of speeches back in the day? I could have made you freaking king of the heroes if you tugged the heartstrings on command. What can you do now? I can make a few calls, Lenny said slowly. No promises, just a few calls for an old friend, a favor if you want it. Owen gave him a smile, and for an instant Lenny was staring through time at the enthusiastic kid he'd first signed so very long ago. I'll take it. 1-2 months later. You sure about this? Lenny asked for somewhere around the 9th time. If Owen's count was correct, that's the beauty of living behind a mask and a costume. Change those elements up and poof, new hero. It takes a little wiggling here and there, especially with Guys of your proportions, but it's nothing I can't pull off." Owen shook his head solemnly. They were in Lenny's office cheesy decor surrounding the two very different men. Owen was suited up in his Titan costume, red shirt, red mask, and blue jeans, all wrapped around nearly 7 feet of solid muscle, as strong as he looked. He was actually far more powerful. Lenny, on the other hand, was still round and balding with a nose that looked like he'd tried to win a few boxing bouts by attacking his opponent's fists with his face. Still, there was more than a touch of smarts and charisma in that foul-mouthed cherub's eyes. Both were masters of their respective trades, though one had been out of the game for a long while on not changing identities. Owen said, "I'm coming back as Titan. If I don't, then I feel like I'm still running. It might not make sense to you, but this is how I have to do it." Lenny ran his hand across the top of his head, touching more skin than hair by a large margin. "Habits didn't die easily, though even if follicles did, I was afraid. You were going to say that. That makes things harder, right? The other way would open up a lot more options. The options for going at it the right way are the ones I want." Owen insisted. "Don't say I didn't warn you." Lenny slid a manila envelope across the desk to his client. "Even with your license reinstated, there weren't a lot of people clamoring to have you on their team. You come with more heat than most folks are willing to take. Solo heroes exist." Owen said. "Not for you, they don't." Lenny countered. "We let you go solo, and that's how you'll be until the end. You look like an outcast, the guy that no one wanted after his scandal. People like me will use your story as a cautionary tale to keep younger heroes in line, but no one does want me." Owen pointed out. "Why would you bring that up? My ulcer isn't bad enough this week without you reminding me what we're trying to pull off here. You're a hurtful man and you should be ashamed." Lenny chastised. "Besides which, you're wrong. The team in that folder agreed to take you, so at least some people want you." Owen took the clue to flip open the folder. As soon as he began reading, a frown formed at the corner of his mouth, visible just below the bottom of his skin-tight mask. The frown deepened the longer he read, until finally his gaze rose from the pages and across the desk to his Agent Corpse. "Are you shitting me? Oh, I'm sorry. Did my months of trying to impress upon you how few your options were not provide a slight clue that you were getting the bottom of the shit bucket? And don't call them that. The technical term is privately employed emergency response supers or peers. If you don't have all day, come on, Lenny, these people aren't even heroes." Owen dropped the file onto the desk. "Why would I be on a team of corpies?" Try as he might, Owen couldn't imagine what sort of justification Lenny would use for this proposal. Corpies were supers who hadn't gone through the screening or training to get their hero certifications, and therefore were not allowed to confront criminal supers. However, through some loophole maneuvering and fancy legal footwork, it had been established that a super did not need a hero certification to assist in any emergency response operation that didn't involve combat. This charge was led by corporations that yearned to get their logos emblazoned on the capes of champions doing good, saving innocents, and spreading the word about how this particular laundry soap got your whites the whitest. Rarely did a corpie attain any real popularity. However, the few times they had gotten a following had been so profitable that companies eagerly rolled the dice and kept right on paying to keep their names on supers. Though many heroes considered them worthless hacks who couldn't cut it in the hero game, the fact remained that having them on hand usually did more good than harm, so their continued existence was tolerated with minor grumbling. But that didn't mean Owen wanted to babysit a damn group of them. Why? Because in order for them to function as an independent team, working in their own fancy headquarters, responding to various disasters and calls, they have to have a hero liaison on staff, someone to back clean up if things get messy or trouble shows up. This team, as luck would have it, just lost their hero to retirement. No others are stepping forward, so they either had to take you on or go back to working in the basement of a police station where the lights don't work and it smells like piss. Those were their options: piss smell or you. But, and Lenny said, raising his voice and rising slightly off his chair, "I had to wheel and deal to make it happen. It was you in a luxury high-rise loft, or no, you in a dank piss-scented basement. And I had to convince them to take you. Are you getting the picture here? Then forget it." Owen replied. "If no team wants me, then I'll go solo. After all, let me be a story. Let everyone call me an outcast and a failure. Better that than chaperoning a bunch of corpies "That is your prerogative," Lenny said, his temper cooling as he lowered himself back into his seat. "You have the right to go at this alone. But if you do, then you're doing it completely alone." A pang of uncertainty smacked Owen in the gut. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you go solo, I'm out. I'll finish the paperwork to make you official again. And that's it." "What the hell, Lenny?" Suddenly, "It's my way or the highway." Whatever happened to finding what works best for the hero? Owen resisted the urge to jump out of his own seat only because he was afraid he might crack the floor. Lenny didn't yell back this time. Instead, he took an antacid from his desk drawer and dropped it into a glass of water with a fizzy plop. "I am thinking about what's best for you. We worked together for a long time back in the day. I know you. And that's why I'm telling you that you need a team. The family man image we sold you has worked because you are a family man. You need people around who depend on you. They give you strength. They are what push you past your hardest moments. Last time you went off on your own, your funk lasted over a decade and didn't break until your sons called you a fucker. You need a team titan. Without one, it's just a matter of time until it all becomes too much and you fall apart again. And I'm not hanging around for it this time." Owen felt his indignation morph into shame. He'd been calling Lenny a quitter when he was the one who'd walked away. Lenny was doing what he did for all his clients, just trying to make sure they were put in the best position to stay happy and employed. He was watching out for Owen. Even after Owen had nearly cost Lenny his reputation all that time ago, Owen reached across and picked back up the folder. "Are they expecting me? You report for duty at 9 tomorrow morning," Lenny informed him. "Seems late. They have a photo shoot at 7. Owen resisted the urge to groan, but only barely to. Owen stared up at the building, admiring the way it jutted into the sky as though it were trying to spear clouds. On days with the right weather, it probably succeeded. He adjusted the duffel bag on his shoulder more out of nerves than necessity. Even as fully as it was packed, the bag was nowhere near heavy enough to actually cause him discomfort. Most of his possessions had been stored back at his place in Colorado, though some had been sent ahead to this building via courier. The things in the bag he never trusted to anyone else. They were too important to be risked. "Titan," the voice snapped Owen out of his marveling and brought him back to reality. He wasn't dressed as Titan currently. Instead, he wore simple clothes and a generic gray mask. Wearing such masks was standard practice for heroes who didn't want to be in character but still needed to go places without showing their face. It was inconvenient, however. It beat the hell out of having one's identity blown, since he wasn't wearing his Titan costume, though it meant this was the man who had known he was coming, or someone who was a really good guesser. The fellow who had spoken was tall and lean, wearing a suit that was conservative enough to say corporate, but expensive enough to show he was high on the food chain. His glasses and watch were designer, and his hair had been expertly styled. Owen suspected he was not going to like this person. "Your herald, Mr. Green, if you don't mind," the man replied. "Whatever you say." Owen hefted his bag again. "We going inside?" "Of course," Mr. Green said. "If you'd be so kind as to follow me, Mr. Green." And Owen walked through the front doors, large glass ones that opened into a sprawling lobby that seemed to be made of marble. All around them, other people in suits and business-appropriate outfits scuttled about, doing things that they no doubt believed were of the utmost importance. In the center of the lobby, just ahead of a long row of elevators, was a circular station where a pair of guards sat. Mr. Green stopped at the station and handed them a card extracted from his breast pocket. "We'll get your key card and ID done this afternoon, Mr. Green informed him. "You'll need them at all times while on premises, otherwise you won't be permitted access." "That's so," Owen said the words casually, but as he spoke his eyes swept the room. Years of experience alerting him to the bits and baubles of security a casual observer wasn't supposed to see. "Have to say, the tasing system built into the floor wouldn't really slow me down, and the knockout gas dispensers you've got disguised as fire alarms would only tickle my throat. Now the pulse cannons you've made to look like a potted plant that might set me back a few steps." "Impressive," Mr. Green commented. "I suppose there is more to you than size and reputation." "I aim to please." Once they passed the security guards, Mr. Green flashed his card in front of an elevator near the end of the line. Its doors whooshed open, and the two men stepped inside. "All this for one team?" Owen asked as the elevator began to rise. "Don't be silly. This building houses offices for multiple companies, all Owned at least partially by Morton Holdings, each member of the team is sponsored by at least one of our companies, so we made a few floors into facilities for them. We find it best if our representatives stay on site. You mean where you can keep an eye on them? Owen said. We provide housing, food facilities, and entertainment, all at no deduction from their salaries. I'd say that's quite a generous situation for them, Mr. Green shot back, because we all know corporations love doing things from the goodness of their hearts. Owen fiddled with his duffel bag once more. Look, I'm not telling you how to run your company or your team, just calling it like I see it. I'd suggest you call it more quietly. Mr. Green's eyes never wavered from the climbing numbers on the elevator's display. We approved taking you on as the hero liaison because it was deemed to be an overall net gain. Should that equation change, we may need to revisit your position's feasibility. Yeah, toe the line like a good boy, or I'm out on my ass. If you don't mind me asking, what made you decide to take me on anyway? I'm not exactly the best PR magnet these days. Morton Holdings has recently received negative publicity at the hands of discrimination lawsuits, alleging we create a hostile working environment for women and homosexuals. Some of the recordings played in court and leaked online were particularly damning. As part of our efforts to assure the public such culture will not be tolerated, we're making strides to earn back the trust of the female and LGBTQ communities. Hiring you was one of many examples of our new corporate culture. The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open, revealing a carpeted hallway leading to a single door. At the end, Owen peered down its depths, counting at least for more security measures designed to take down anything from humans to rhinos to supers with enhanced durability. These people didn't skimp on security, at least, so you give me a second chance and hope the public will give you one. Not bad. What about the rest of the team? They picked to smooth out scandals, to know they were chosen for their abilities, appeal, marketability, and talents there are for. Aside from yourself, Galvanize, excellent. Bubble and Zone. Galvanize is their leader since he has the most training and experience. As he spoke, Mr. Green stepped out of the elevator and began walking down the hall. Don't worry, the system recognizes biometrics, and anyone accompanied by me is considered friendly. We'll get you programmed in when we do your key card. Owen contemplated telling this man that he hadn't hesitated out of worry for himself. He had been more afraid of breaking something if the system went after him. He decided to stay quiet, however. No need to rock the boat too much on the first day. Besides, there was zero doubt Mr. Green was the kind of man who'd read up on Titan. He knew it would take more than standard safeguards to bring down this near giant of a man. Anything else I should know before we go in? Owen followed his escort off the elevator, noting that it closed swiftly as soon as he exited. Only this: even though you are not sponsored by any of our companies, by aligning with people who are, you become a de facto representative of us. We expect you to take that seriously and behave appropriately. Me, I'm always appropriate, Owen said, making an expression as innocent as he could behind the gray mask. Glad to hear it, glad to say it. Now let's go on in. Fuckwad. The look on Mr. Green's face was worth the earful Owen knew he'd be getting later. With a slight chuckle and a genuine smile, he took the last several steps and opened the door. Owen's first headquarters hadn't been much, whether it was a hero, a doctor, an MBA, or a bartender. A recent college grad is a recent college grad. True, Owen had made a little money during his internship under Citadel, his hero mentor. However, he'd likely have made better cash waiting tables during that time. The end result was that when his first team formed, their financial resources were limited. Their headquarters/living area had been a near-condemned old mattress store that they directed half-assed partitions in. It had been derelict, dirty, and largely unsafe. Still, he carried fond memories of that time in his life, if only because both he and the people he worked with were still young and idealistic enough that the future looked like a bright and wonderful thing. His first thought upon walking into this new team's headquarters was that if his first team had been able to get a place like this, they would have taken a lot fewer calls in favor of staying home and being comfortable. The front doors opened into an expansive living room. Next to it was a large kitchen gleaming with stainless steel appliances. Windows lined the far wall, looking out toward the city and providing a breathtaking view. The floor was carpeted with lush, soft material. In the living room, a gigantic television stood in the center of an entertainment unit, surrounded by various video game systems and flanked by a wraparound leather couch. A young woman with ink black hair and makeup pale skin mashed on a controller, and a small male figure on said giant screen plummeted down a spiked pit to his doom fucking bullshit horse-cock dick garglers. The woman swore, spitting it all out as nearly one word. She jammed a button on the controller, and the screen reloaded. The digital man immediately resurrected. Keep it down, said another woman, this one sitting on an end of the couch so far away it faced the door rather than the television. Her skin was pale, though it was also dotted with freckles at irregular intervals. Her carefully styled copper hair was swept to the side, purposely not obscuring her line of vision. As she flipped the page on her magazine, "Why don't you go try to suck a gig out of a producer's cock?" The other woman shot back, "Why don't both you notice we have a guest and show a little class?" said a new voice, this one from a young man emerging out of the kitchen. With peeled orange slices in hand, he turned to greet Owen and Mr. Green with a wide, practiced, and dazzling smile. His wavy brown hair and boy next door features only completed the effect, making him appear affable, friendly, and immediately accessible. "I'm sorry about that, I'm galvanized," the team leader Titan Owen replied, taking the young man's hand in a firm shake. It had been a lot of work learning to shake hands without shattering bones, but he'd perfected it ages ago. "The one playing video games is excellent, and the woman reading is bubble bubble," Galvanized said, pointing to each as he spoke. "Excellent." Paused the game to give Owen a half-hearted wave, turning in her seat rather than standing up. She was lean, slender all over, but with the type of tight muscle one saw in athletes and heroes. Her face was probably pretty, but since it was obscured by several piercings, dark lipstick, and so much eye makeup that it even coated her cheekbones, it was hard to tell. She wore all black and had a tattoo of some bat-like creature on her left shoulder. Bubble bubble, on the other hand, was especially put together. She wore clothes that had the kind of simple elegance that looked ordinary, but Owen knew actually cost a dump truck of money. She had a more classic beauty, the kind one might find in the Marilyn Monroe era. This one at least gave a smile and said hello before turning back to the magazine in her lap. "Where's own Mr. Green?" asked, interrupting the already awkward introductions. In the gym, Galvanized replied, "His exercise quota is higher than ours. After all, of course, that is acceptable. Then just be sure he is introduced to Titan when he finishes," Mr. Green instructed. He turned his attention to Titan. "I'll send someone to help you get set up in an hour or two. In the meantime, settle in and meet your new team with not so much as a good luck." Mr. Green turned around and walked through the doors, which closed with a whooshing sound afterward. "Isn't he just a ray of sunshine?" Owen muttered. "You get used to him," Galvanized said. "Why don't you get comfortable? Take off your mask and shoes. Can I get you something to drink?" At the mention of his mask, Owen's eyes immediately went to the glass, which was so clear it barely registered as present. Galvanized saw where he was looking. "Don't worry, it only looks that way from our side. It's custom durable beyond durable and impossible to see through from the outside." Owen trusted Galvanized's words. However, unmasking in an unfamiliar place was something every bit of his life's experiences told him not to do. Besides, he was going to have to leave soon to go get his access card, and what not better to be masked in case the person coming to get him had access. "I'm fine for now. As for the drink, what kind of beers do you have?" "Oh, I'm so sorry, none of us are allowed to have alcohol," Galvanized told him, "part of our contracts and health requirements. I can offer you fresh squeezed guava juice, mango juice, specially made vitamin-infused water." "Water is fine," Owen said, reeling at how kids this young could be okay with being banned from beer. Afterward, he chastised himself. These were accomplished professionals in their own right. He didn't need to start thinking of them as kids just because he was old. Coming right up, Galvanized walked to the kitchen and returned with a colorful bottle mere moments later. "So since you're new here, what would you like to know?" "Let's just start with the basics." Owen grabbed a chair in a part of the living room not dominated by the giant couch where the two women were still largely ignoring him. "What are everyone's powers?" "A perfectly great place to start," Galvanize agreed enthusiastically. "To go around the room, Hexalyn has the ability to summon creatures out of thin air." "Demons," Hexalyn corrected, not looking away from her game. "They are somewhat scary looking, and given the goth image her advertisers pay for, we would like it if you referred to them as demons," said Galvanize, soothing his teammate while shooting Owen an apologetic look. Summoners weren't too common. Owen had only met a few in his hero career. Of course, the term was a bit of a misnomer What they actually did wasn't summoning, it was creating an animate energy construct. It worked the same as people, who could duplicate themselves only. Instead of a personal copy, they formed something else. Most only had a few things they could create. The complexity to form one was so intense that having more than a couple of options made it too muddled to keep straight. How many can she summon? I got 3. Hexaline answered from the couch. 3 wasn't bad, it was definitely HCP grade. Owen made a mental note to find out more about her power later, then motion for galvanize to continue. Bubble can create energy spheres that are pretty durable, and she can even move them with her mind. Not terribly fast, so we can't use them for rapid transport, but they are quite helpful in getting people out of high places and the like. Evidently Bubble saw no need to correct Galvanize's assessment as she continued to read quietly. Zone is in the gym, but his ability is basically enhanced agility, strength, and reactions. He's not at the level of really powerful supers, but from the human perspective, he's the best athlete alive. That's why he picked that name, because it's like he's always in the zone, Galvanus said, which leaves me aside from a nearly negligible side effect of minor enhanced durability and strength. My main power is to give people a little extra push. I can AMP them up and bring them to their peak. You're an enhancer. Owen's eyes went wide. Enhancers were rare, damned near mythical supers who could increase the strength of a person's power, not a true one. No, I just bring people to their own physical best, and I have absolutely no effect on people's abilities. Again, it's all physical. I can't make them better than they normally would be, just take them to the maximum of their own level. It's like if you were a car and the absolute best you could get up to with ideal handling was 190 miles per hour. I would jump you to that speed. A real enhancer would bump you to like 300. I see. So when you use this ability of yours, anyone you target is suddenly going at maximum strength, speed, etc. within the limits of what their body can physically do. You got it. Galvano said it doesn't last long, but it's made the difference a few times in helping get people to safety. I want you to listen to me very, very carefully, Owen said, leaning in slightly so that he was towering over Galvanize. Even while they both sat, never use that power on me, never, no matter what. Are we clear? Okay, Galvanized mumbled, clearly taken aback. There's no shame in needing a push on occasion, though my worry is not that I will need a push. It is that I am incredibly strong and have worked for years to make sure I am in total control of that strength. If you suddenly jack me to maximum power, then I don't know how much destruction I'll cause, but it will be a lot. Now are we clear? Owen repeated. We're clear, Galvanize replied. Owen surveyed his new room. It was large. Not that he was surprised by this, but aside from the few boxes that had been shipped from Colorado, its size made the space seem surprisingly sparse. A bed in the corner dresser by the far wall, with a small television perched on top, and a desk across from the door dominated by a monitor and keyboard. Upon further inspection, it only seemed underfurnished compared to the opulence that had been present everywhere else. After basic introductions, Galvanize had shown him around. The area set aside for their residence consisted of 3 floors. Below the elevator entrance was the gym, a sprawling state-of-the-art facility with enough equipment to accommodate a team of Olympic hopefuls. Unfortunately, since none of his new team had supremely advanced strength, there were no ultra-dense weights that Owen could use. He didn't mind that too much, though part of his ability kept his muscles from atrophying, so it wasn't as though he'd get weaker without training if the need arose. He could always have someone ship his old weight set from Colorado over. He'd just have to pick a company that didn't charge by the pound. The gym level also housed a large room outfitted with various sandbags, movable platforms, and mock building fronts. Galvanize had explained to Owen that this was the room where they honed their rescue skills, doing drills through constantly changing scenarios to make sure they were on top of their game. Here, Owen had met Zone, a tan young man with frosted tips, a dazzling smile, and a body fat percentage so low it had to be unhealthy. They'd exchanged pleasantries, then Zone had hustled off to shower before an appearance promoting a skateboard company he represented. From the speed at which the younger super moved, Owen suspected he was less than thrilled to have this new addition to their team. Owen didn't really mind. He wasn't exactly dancing at the idea of being here himself. After all, the middle floor was the one where he'd entered. Aside from the living room and kitchen, there was a large dining room, a conference room, and an office with several professional-grade computers, printers, and the Like Galvanize explained that this was so anyone who needed to print out headshots or other such paraphernalia before an appearance could do so in the comfort of their own home evidently. They had formerly outsourced such tasks, but it had turned out that doing them in-house was far more cost and time efficient. The last floor was their living quarters, 5 large bedrooms, private bathrooms, a small nook with a coffee bar, and a sealed door. Owen had asked about the sealed door, which, according to Galvanize, was a high-tech area that only upper management was allowed to access. Evidently inside was a variety of gadgets and technology they were only permitted to use during training and missions. For a brief moment Owen contemplated snapping the metal door down with a minor exertion of effort, then thought better of it. It was only his first day, and he'd promised Lenny he'd try and be on good behavior given the abundant wealth of the team. Owen was now on. He suspected his manager had pulled more than a few strings to make this happen. He needed to play nice at least until he knew if he could handle this place or not. Once the tour was done, they headed back to the main floor where a pretty woman with a notepad was waiting for Owen. She took him back through the building down to a normal business floor and set about the task of registering him in the system. Stacks upon stacks of forms were signed, so many that Owen nearly spaced out and used his real name several times. Heroes' code names were for purposes of legal contracts considered acceptable alternatives to their own names. This had come about as more heroes sought to enter private industry based on their hero credentials, but were not willing to compromise their secret identities. The only exception to this rule was for heroes who inherited a legacy name, a name used already by a previous super. They had to add a number after their signatures distinguishing their identities so that they were not bound by contracts or agreements their predecessors had signed. After the seemingly endless forms, he'd been taken to a different area where he was forced to step into a strange machine that cataloged his biometrics, which would in turn allow him access to his new home. Then he was given a badge and card for entry into the building. Owen could not for the life of him understand why they insisted on taking a picture for his badge. Even though he was wearing a mask, he pointed this out. Even offered to go back and change into his Titan mask so that it would be consistent, but his guide had merely shushed him down and assured him this was all part of standard procedure and had to be done in a precise way. Owen tried once more, pointing out it made no sense. The woman agreed, then told him to sit in front of the camera and not to smile because that would make the picture harder to recognize. Owen gave up and complied. Now at last he was done for the day, officially registered. He was a part of this team. In every legal way he might have made an effort to connect with them more. But by the time he finished, everyone was out doing various appearances. Owen wondered if they spent every day like this, and if so, how they were ever around to respond in time to emergencies. He needed to see what these kids could do, and soon. Otherwise, when they finally did go on a call, he'd have no idea how to treat them. If something went wrong, it was an issue he'd try and remedy tomorrow. Owen carefully unpacked his duffel bag containing the possessions, too important to trust to a courier service. First were his Titan costumes. He kept 6 of them so that if one was dirty or in need of repair, he had spares on hand. They were made from hardy material, but supers like him were often put in situations that not even technology-enhanced cloth could stand up to. Next came a large metal box with a strange orb-shaped lock on it. Inside were a variety of trinkets and trophies from his first round of hero days. Some were too dangerous to let out of his sight, but most just held too much sentimental value. The final item extracted from his bag was a picture frame. Inside it were 2 photos set side by side. The first showed a younger Owen and a small boy in a junkyard, the boy proudly holding a washing machine over his head. The second was Owen and another boy, this one noticeably heavier, clutching a spelling bee trophy in his hands. In both photos one could easily make out traces of Owen's strong face in the children's features. Owen carefully set this frame on his desk next to the monitor. Now he was home. 5 This is stupid. Excellent, complained loudly, hands incessantly tugging on her sweatshirt as she tried to get comfortable. In the unfamiliar garb, "You're not our fucking leader, you're just here as a token hero so we can do our job. We don't need to prove shit to you." "Excellent, that's enough," said Galvanize, his tone gentle but firm. "No, it's okay, I don't blame her for calling bullshit." Owen replied, his own chest bare, as none of the sweatshirts he found in the gym were large enough to fit him. As it was the sweatpants he'd found only came halfway down his calves, looking as though they'd been meant as capris. The first thing that morning, Owen had found Galvanized to request a full team meeting. Galvanized had complied and gathered everyone in the gym less than an hour later, unfortunately. Since it was an official meeting, the rules demanded they wear their official team sweats rather than whatever was comfortable and fit them best currently. They were all standing around in the part of the gym designed for rescue simulations. Eyes set on the now unmasked newcomer in their midst. Walking in maskless had been a tough decision for Owen, one he'd ultimately realized was inevitable. Teamwork hinged on trust. They had it with each other. He could see that in their body language. As the new guy, he would have to earn it. Showing them his face was a small but necessary step in that process. I took the time to read up on all of you last night before bed. You have good response rates, excellent percentages of civilians saved, and 0 unauthorized encounters with criminal supers. The first 2 are good, but the last one struck me as odd given that nearly half of the incidents you responded to last year were caused by criminal supers. It seems like you'd at least have needed to retreat or work around one at some point. We don't take unnecessary risks, Zone said, even wearing dumpy gray sweats. The man still looked as though he'd walked in from fashion shoot. If Mirror Fog suspected any criminal super involvement, we kept our distance until it was clear Mirror Fog had been their last hero on staff, now retired to somewhere tropical and pretty. That's because Mirror Fog's ability allowed him to discover if one was at the scene of the emergencies. And pointed out, I don't have that power, which means when we go on calls, there will be a very real chance of running into a criminal super. Sounds like your problem. Excellent, said. It is my problem, but getting civilians out of the danger zone is yours. That's why I need to see what you each can do. It will tell me whether to call for a full retreat or have you keep helping people while I handle the situation. Technically, that would be my call, Galvani said. With all due respect, no, it wouldn't. Owen phrased his reply as carefully as he could. He liked Galvan's eyes. The kid seemed earnest in his efforts to help, but it was important to make things clear from the get-go. Most of the time, yes, you're the leader, and I respect that, but the minute we have to deal with some super causing trouble, I'm in command. I've got the training and experience to make those kinds of calls. Mirror Fog never tried to pull rank on us like that. Zone snapped. Mirror Fog kept you away from other supers, so it never came up. Owen countered. Our goal here is the same. We don't want anyone to get hurt. The difference is that when things go wrong, you have to worry about civilians, and I have to worry about you. The debate might have gone on longer, but at that moment, Bubble stepped forward and made a gesture at one of the dummies. A blue tingled sphere appeared around the false person and began moving upwards slowly. They're slow, and they only get slower the more bubbles. I try to move it once, she said, her tone as even as it had been when reading her magazine. At best, I could move one across a football field in 2 minutes. At worst, it would be around 10. The largest sphere I can create is big enough to hold around 5 people or one sedan-sized car. I can partially engulf large objects without destroying them, but that leaves the bubble's integrity extremely compromised. How many can you conjure at once? Owen asked. Up to 5, but any more than 3, and the durability begins to degrade. Bubble answered. I see. And how durable are they before that happens? They've stopped bullets, repelled flames, and taken large chunks of debris falling on them without giving way. But if you would like to test for yourself, feel free. Another gesture, and a sphere roughly 5 feet wide materialized in front of Owen. You read my mind, Owen said, looking the bubble up and down. The thing about energy barriers people often failed to realize was that in order to stop something, physical force had to be exerted on it. Force flowing one way meant it could flow back the other. So while energy barriers were resistant to physical attacks, enough strength behind a blow could still shatter them. Owen went slow first, doing nothing more than giving it a one-fingered thump. The sphere rippled, but held firm. Next, he made a loose fist with his hand and struck it with a knocking motion, as though he were rapping on someone's door. The rippling was far more evident this time, yet still the bubble held. The fingers in his hand grew closer as his fist tightened when he struck this time, it was like he was pounding on a door, a hammer of flesh trying to pierce the obstacle before it. The bubble shattered in a bright burst of energy, whooshing sounds, and a surge of heat accompanying the event. What the hell, BB, I thought. Your bubbles were supposed to be tough, Gramps. They're barely even touched it. Zone chided. No, it was surprisingly strong. Owen corrected. The force I used on that last blow was roughly equivalent to it being hit by a speeding car. Sounds about right for the reaction it generated. Bubble made a quick motion with her hands to drop the suspended dummy. Everyone had forgotten about horse shit. It does. That was barely a punch even for an old man. Excellent, said. Then I say it's time we tested your power next. Owen replied, I think this old man may just surprise you unless you're afraid to put your power where your mouth is. Bring it on. Gramps, excellent, evidently had no qualms about stealing the nickname Zone had used. I've always wanted to show up one of you fancy ass heroes. You should walk more to the center of the room. Galvanized advised. So there's space to move about if you say so. Owen wasn't too worried about needing to dodge, but stranger things had happened in his life. A few large steps brought him to the center of the unobstructed area, with ample space around him. Excellent made no such motions. Aren't you coming? Owen called to the dark-haired woman. I don't get my hands dirty. I've got people for that. Excellent replied, let me demonstrate. No. Galvanize held up a hand, and Excellent, to her credit, froze in place instantly. I know what you're about to do, and no, show him the other to first. This is supposed to be a full assessment, not you trying to prove a point. Fine. Excellent agreed, drawing out the word into a whine. I'll start from the bottom. My smallest demon is Impers. We use him for recon and message relaying. She stuck out her hand and exerted a minor bit of focus. Next to Owen, a small creature appeared in a puff of red smoke. It was about a foot tall, human shaped with red skin and diminutive horns on its head, large bat-like wings nearly as long as it was tall extended from its back, and a 3-inch tail swept from side to side out of its rear. The creature made a chittering noise, then leapt into the air. Owen was surprised with the grace it had in flight. It moved through the air with precision and speed. Impers circled the room for times, then landed on Hex's shoulder and made the chittering noise again. How is that thing used for messages? Owen asked. It can't talk. It is a he, and we worked out a system. Hexaline explained. Emperors can understand the questions we ask him, plus he can control the clicks. He makes one click means yes to means number 3 means follow me, and for means run like hell as long as you ask the right questions. It's pretty effective. Useful, Owen said, trying his best to hide the surprise at this creature being any gender, let alone male. Still, since it sprang from the summoner's mind, no one was more familiar with it than she. Anything else I should know? Emperors is the smartest of my summons, so he can take the most complex directions. The others make noise, but they have to be ordered more directly. Emperors excels in situations where we're trying to locate people who are trapped, since he can remember where he sees them and point to it on a map. He's frailer than the other two, but fireproof. All of them are fireproof. Actually, the fireproof part didn't shock Owen at all. Okay, what's next? Impers vanished in the same smoke. He'd appeared in another motion from Hexlet, and a much larger cloud of red smoke appeared near Owen. Out of this came a creature roughly 5 feet tall, with the head of a vulture atop a hunched body. Its feet were taloned, and in place of arms or wings were 2 long translucent white blades in the shape of spires. Her name is Huggles. Excellent, informed Owen. Huggles. I was feeling a bit feisty and sarcastic when I created her, she admitted. Anyway, those blades on her arm are sharp enough to cut through most metals, and she's got the strength to wield them. She's most useful for getting people out of cars, sawing through debris, that sort of thing. I see mind having her strike me. I can, but it won't prove anything. Excellent, said Huggles. Can't cut through anything stronger than steel, and even that gives her trouble. I'd assume a veteran hero like you is at least that tough. Nonetheless, I'd prefer if you did. Owen stuck out his left arm and left it there freely exposed. Have it your way. Huggles cut his arm. Excellent yelled. The words had no sooner left her mouth than the bird thing whirled into action again, moving with more grace than its form should allow. She swung both arm blades down in a smooth slice, striking to places on Owen's forearms. As soon as the blades met his skin, the motion ceased completely. He'd never expected Huggles to be powerful enough to move him, but he was surprised by the amount of strength the demon could muster. It was good to know this thing had some power behind it. Not bad, Owen complimented. I take it there's one left. Yep, And I saved the best for last this time. Excellent's motions were slower, and there was a noticeable delay between Huggle's disappearance and the next demon's cloud of smoke. Once it appeared, though it was impossible to miss. The cloud was huge, and Owen caught the faint scent of brimstone in his nostrils once the smoke cleared. He found himself in the rare position of looking up. This monster stood over 7 and 2 feet tall, likely 8 if one included the large black horns jutting upward from its forehead. Thick catenary black plates covered much of its body, concentrated on the disproportionately large arms, the broad chest, and the thick legs ending in the large hooves. Its face was dog-like, black sharp teeth in its muzzle, and a pair of glowing red eyes above the snout. Any monster movie company would have paid top dollar for this creature to appear in one of their films, assuming they could keep the rest of the cast from pissing themselves. His name is Big Henry. Excellent supplied helpfully. His job is heavy lifting, clearing rubble, moving cars, holding up support beams, that sort of thing. More or less the only things you'd be good at, except he doesn't need a room and pay. Owen examined the creature closely. He knew enough about summoners to know that their creatures were often born of a problem or need. Creating another being from nothing was intensely difficult. The only way to succeed was to pour an aspect of one's self into it. The summons were supposed to do something that summoner couldn't. They represented a strength to fill in a perceived weakness. This summon was not built for heavy lifting, it was built for fighting, maybe for killing. Guess we should give the people what they want, Owen said, pointing to the other 3 supers. Why not have him give me a little tap? I thought you'd never ask. Excellent replied. Big Henry, punch him with everything you've got. This time she didn't yell, she barely even raised her voice. Owen had just enough time to wonder if her summons even needed to be close enough to hear for her orders to work. When Big Henry sprang at him, this one didn't have as much grace as the other 2, but he made up for it with a shocking amount of speed. He whirled forward, hooves nearly cracking the floor, with each step closing the gap between him and Owen. In mere moments, the punch came at the end of the movement, part of the motion's flow that utilized the extra momentum. It was impressive, especially for a being that Owen suspected had never been trained. The black armored fist drove directly into his torso, right between his sternum and stomach. It had so much power that even braced in an appropriate stance, Owen was still moved back several inches as the concrete under his feet crumbled against the indirect force. Better than I expected, Owen said, clearly unharmed or inconvenienced by the attack. He glanced up at Hexentant, whose face had morphed from its usual antisocial glower into an expression of genuine shock. Given how strong this summon was, she'd likely thought it would at least do some damage to him. Owen didn't fault her for that belief. She hadn't been inside the hero world. Her sense of scale for what constituted strong didn't even have a ranking for someone like Titan. How durable is this one? Owen asked, his question shaking her out of her surprised reverie. Damn near indestructible. Her jaw was setting, her eyes growing narrow. She was gearing up for round 2 when she'd show that her summon was at least no less durable than he. If it could take his blow with the same lack of effort, it would prove they were on even footing. Bowen fortunately knew better. Good to know, Bowen said, taking a step back from the summon, which remained half crouched, to attack. Luckily, since you don't have to use him to fight, we don't need to test that. Let's move on. Zone, how about you show me what you can do? Hexcellent stared at him for a few moments longer before dismissing Big Henry back to smoke. Owen was sure she wasn't happy with him at the moment, but that would have to wait. He needed to finish seeing everyone's skill set for now. After that, he could work on making them better before either Zone or Owen could step forward. A bright red light flashed through the room, followed by a brief siren that abated in moments, replaced by the calm voice of Mr. Green. There's a fire 2.5 miles away from here. It's an older building, and structural integrity is a concern. Firefighters are currently spread thin, so they've requested our help. We'll do it. Galvanized yelled into the air. Owen presumed Green could hear them, a suspicion confirmed moments later when the voice came back into the air. Understood. They'll be expecting your arrival. Transport is in the basement. When you're ready. You heard the man. Everyone into your costumes and downstairs. If you take longer than 5 minutes, you're getting left behind. Galvanized commanded. His tone had seamlessly shifted from controlled but friendly to authoritative. Owen had no doubt he'd be abandoned if he dared go over the 5-minute mark. Evidently, the others believed Galvanized too, as they immediately dashed off toward the door zone, peeling off part of his sweats. Before he'd even gotten clear of the room, feeling nervous, galvanized ass breaking into a light jog so as not to violate his own edict. Little bit and admitted, been a long time. You'll be fine, fires are where BB and Hexcellent really shine. Just follow orders and everyone will get home safe. That would be a pleasant outcome, Owen. I agreed. How nice these kids had it when if they did their job right, no one died in the hero world. Even if you did everything perfectly, sometimes success still meant blood on your hands. Titan nearly missed his debut that day due to the mirror in Owen's room. He tried on his old costume before leaving Colorado, of course. But that had been a piecemeal ordeal, donning and checking each section separately so problems could be identified in turn. It wasn't until he was fully suited up walking toward his door that the figure in the mirror caught his attention and stopped him cold. It had been over a decade since he'd seen this person. Looking back in a reflection, this was different than going to see Lenny. This was a man about to walk out into a world of danger. He wasn't just Owen Daniels wearing a costume, he was Titan. And the full weight of that realization nearly sent him to the ground. So many memories, so many ordeals, so much lost. Part of him wanted to shrink back, to let Titan fall away in costumed pieces and turn back into Owen instead. He reached up to the side of his mask and pressed a device in his ear, hidden by the red material covering his face. None of the others would have this accessory. It was only for heroes. They'd made improvements to the earpieces since he last suited up. This one was light and nestled in the crevice of his ear, with total security, giving a sense that no sideways blow would knock it loose. The things had always been damn tough, but a good rocking could send them flying. Titan was unsurprised to find this flaw had been addressed. Titan reporting, in his words echoed through the empty room. Dispatch recognizes Titan, said a soft voice in his ear. Somewhere in his stomach a knot of worry loosened. Part of him worried Dispatch would have changed as well, but her voice was the same as always, strong, well enunciated, and with a vaguely European accent. No one, at least no one Titan, had ever talked to knew Dispatch's real name, location, or even powers. She was just always there, no matter what time anyone plugged in, always there, always the same. Titan, please respond, she repeated. Owen realized he'd zoned out listening to her voice, but not her words. Sorry, repeat the question. You are cleared for active hero assignments and for monitoring of a privately employed emergency response supers team. Which of these tasks are you signing in for? I'm babysitting the corpses tonight, Owen replied, working very hard to keep the annoyance out of his voice. If he signed in for active hero duty, it would mean she'd direct him to any calls for help that fit the bill. Being on oversight duty meant he could use her if a situation arose, but she wouldn't try to assign any new tasks to him. Confirmed, Dispatch said. Is your team responding to the fire on 43rd Street? Since corpses and heroes overlapped on rescue duties, Dispatch always knew who was going where. If that's about 2 miles from my current location, then yes. Owen broke his eyes away from the mirror and headed out his door. The earpiece wouldn't be bothered by anything like walking. He'd seen people easily hold conversations with Dispatch while flying at supersonic speeds. Confirmed, you are on note. Owen winced. Involuntarily on note meant he was officially working the incident, and any other hero who wanted to check and see if it was handled could find out he was there. Being a working hero made it pretty much impossible to keep a low profile. Thank you. Anything I should know going in? Owen rounded the corner and stepped into the elevator at the end of the hall. The team had already informed him that the space below the lobby button would take him to a transport basement if pressed by someone with the right biometrics. A small push from his thumb, and the spot of clear metal suddenly lit up, sending him on a rapid journey downward. No documented supers or powers in residence at the building. Cause of fire is undetermined, though given degree of neglect and decay in the neighborhood, natural causes are highly possible. Nothing in the reports so far suggests any variant human activity, so if it is a super, I'm going in blind. Owen muttered he preferred to get at least a forewarning on these sorts of things. Again, nothing suggests I know. Sorry, Dispatch, I'm just a little on edge. Owen told her. Ah yes, this is your first active assignment since renewing your license. Dispatch paused, an occurrence so rare it stood out like a curse in Owen's in that case, let me be the first to say welcome back. The world has missed you. Tighten. The elevator opened with a pneumatic whoosh, revealing a large black vehicle with a single open door. Owen moved toward it. Tell the world I'm on my way. Their vehicle had a siren, which Owen found surprisingly delightful in his hero days. They'd had people with flight, teleportation, and other various means of covering distance, so the only time he'd heard sirens was from the police and emergency responders showing up. In the aftermath, sitting in the vehicle making the sound reminded him of his childhood before his abilities manifested, when he would feel a thrill every time the firefighters or police officers would drive by. Certainly, this team's transportation had far more advanced accoutrements than the siren. It was constructed out of an SUV, however, the whole thing had been heavily fortified from the wheels to the antenna. Even with 5 people inside, one of whom was far from slender, the car had only dropped a few inches. Bright lights buzzed along the dashboard. Zone was fiddling with something where the passenger glove box should have been while galvanized drove them quickly but safely through traffic. There was likely an electronics store worth of useful gadgets and pricey doodads all at their fingertips. But Owen was really only fond of the siren. Everyone could see the telltale smoke billowing up from the fire a few blocks before they reached it. Had it been darker, Owen knew there would have been an orange glow cast against the clouds visible for miles. Daytime stole much of the scenic drama away. They came to a stop just outside a police barrier, galvanized, dashing out the door before the rest of them could even unbuckle their seatbelts. He has to go talk to the cops and firemen. Excellent, said, answering a question that Owen would have been tactful enough not to ask. Unlike heroes, we can't just gallivant in wherever we want. We have to respect the chain of authority. She changed into her costume, a black number with lots of zippers, buckles, and torn fishnets. Several logos, apparently for makeup companies, dotted her outfit. One for a clothing store named Fiery Discussion was featured. No fewer than 4 times. To be fair, it's also a good practice, because they can tell us where our help is needed most. Zone added his costume was comprised of a skin-tight material across his torso that was see-through everywhere. A logo wasn't present. It seemed he was heavily sponsored by skateboard companies, a few football franchises, and one very enthusiastic energy drink. The latter logo for a brand called Punch Juice took up almost the entirety of his back. He's right, Owen agreed. When we can heroes talk to uniforms? To it's smart to get all the information you can. Zone gave a nod, but pointedly avoided making eye contact with Owen despite the older man's agreement. This, it seemed, was going to be the least cordial of his working relationships. He idly wondered if Zone was a fundamentalist, a bigot, or just didn't care for having a washed-up hero on his team. It didn't really matter as long as the young man could stay polite. He was free to dislike Owen all he wanted. We should catch up, Bubble advised them. Her costume was barely a costume at all, more like an experimental outfit from a high-end designer. It was white and green, which went well with the emerald contacts she'd slipped over her naturally brown eyes, and hugged her body in a way that spoke to the figure beneath without going so far as to divulge secrets. Even the logo she wore seemed a bit more tasteful than the others', colors downplayed so they didn't clash with her ensemble. Bubble was sponsored by makeup companies, as well as skin management creams, and a name Owen fleetingly recognized as someone who made designer handbags. Corps didn't need costumes or masks, of course, since they didn't undertake activities that earned them enemies. Heroes wore the capes and cowls by tradition, as well as necessity, when one's job required capturing or killing powerful people who often have powerful friends. It's essential for them not to know where one hung their hat. Corpies were effectively specialized rescue services like EMT or firefighters. They weren't making anyone mad, so it was assumed by most, Owen included, that they wore the costumes in a vain attempt to seem more like the heroes they weren't. He kept those thoughts to himself as they exited the car and headed toward Galvanize. It was a free country, and they had as much right to wear costumes as they did to wear t-shirts or jeans. Their leader met them a few feet from the building, his outfit's cape flapping slightly in the breeze. Galvanize wore a costume closest to the style of real heroes, a navy and white ensemble with cuffed gloves, calf-high boots, and even an emblazoned cape. He was sponsored by Punch Juice as well, along with several protein and nutritional supplement companies. The enthusiastic young man wore a serious expression, exactly what one should look like When dealing with a dangerous situation, Owen knew the pictures of him would look great, which he took to be the point. All right. Team, I just spoke with the firemen, and this place is very unstable. They believe they've gotten everyone out from the bottom floors, but the top ones have proven treacherous to explore. We need to search for any survivors. Excellent. Get Impers up to the top floor immediately, and have him let us know if he finds anyone's own. I want you to start on the floor below Bubble. That means he needs a way up. Tighten you, and I will make our way from the ground floor. Hexalin and BB will stay out here to evacuate anyone from the higher floors with Big Henry and energy spheres. Be quick, be adaptable, and make sure you don't get in any of the firemen's way. Any questions? Do they know what started the fire zone? Asked. Nothing conclusive. It's an old building, lots of smokers, and ancient wiring. Galvanize replied, if that's it, let's go. Galvanize had no sooner yelled the last part than everyone sprang into action. Hexalent summoned Impers in a cloud of smoke and had him leap into the air. Heading for the top floor, Galvanized took off toward the entrance, pausing only to throw a small black mask on over his mouth and nose. Owen was a few steps behind, lagging a bit out of curiosity. Bubble had been told to give Zone away up to the second highest floor. Given what Owen knew of their powers, he was wondering how they were going to pull that off. The spectacle did not disappoint. Zone took off running, aiming himself at the side of the building in a smooth, fluid motion. He leapt from the ground foot, catching a brick window sill that he used for a second leap. Another jump off the top of the window's outcropping brought him a few feet higher, but with it he was out of usable footholds until the next window. When Zone's sneakers met the flat brick wall, he pushed backward instead of up, executing a perfect backflip that sent him twirling through the air instead of plummeting to the ground. As one would have expected, he momentarily landed on the energy sphere Bubble had placed directly under him, launching himself off of it. Zone's nimble feet made it to the next window sill, and the dance began all over again. It was difficult, dangerous, and stupidly risky, but it was impressive. Owen had to give them that the wave of heat that washed over Owen was oppressive, stifling, and strangely familiar. It had been well past a decade since he plunged into a wild inferno. He found the experience a touch nostalgic. The bottom floor of the building was almost entirely engulfed in flames, to some degree thick dark smoke pouring out and limiting visibility. From what he could see, the situation looked grim. Despite the brick exteriors, almost the entire inside was made of wood that was rapidly turning to ash at the rate the fire was spreading. It was a matter of when, not if, the entire structure was going to come crashing down. By his estimates, they had maybe 20 minutes left, and that was only thanks to the incredible efforts of the firefighters to control the flames. Come on, Galvanized urged, his voice coming through the communicator in Owen's left ear. Right ear was always reserved for dispatch, but he needed to be able to talk with his team as well. Their earbuds weren't quite as good as the hero-issued ones. However, they weren't as far behind the curve as he might have guessed they'd be. Owen followed his leader, taking careful steps. The floor appeared solid enough, but the stairs were a source of concern for him. They weren't blazing in earnest yet, so thankfully their structural integrity was enough to hold his weight. As he ascended to the second floor, still Owen continued being watchful of his movements. Him falling through a few burning floors wouldn't injure him in the slightest, but it would definitely hasten this building's destruction. The first and second floors were clear of everyone save for emergency responders, and it was obvious they were going to have to pull out soon. The building was 8 stories tall, so that meant they likely had at least 2 more levels to go before they met up with Zone and Impers. Assuming neither team had to stop and facilitate any rescues, he hoped they would find the whole place properly evacuated. Getting someone out of the middle floors might be tricky. Does the heat bother you? The question came so suddenly that Owen nearly twitched in surprise, a move that easily could have crushed the smoldering wood beneath his feet. Luckily, his entire career of experience hadn't quite deserted him, so he managed to keep control. No, not really, he replied. I'm a little surprised at how well you're taking it, though I did mention I was a bit hardier than normal. Galvanized replied. Besides, the costume does a lot of the work. It's specially built for extreme temperatures in either direction, along with a fair bit of armoring in the more vulnerable spots, just in case I get hit by debris or something. Pair it with the breather mask, which keeps me from getting carbon monoxide poisoning, And it's a handy ensemble, pretty snazzy, Owen said, dating himself unapologetically. With his word choice, one of the perks of working for the big guys. When I started out, all I got was a t-shirt with a logo on it. This is much safer. Galvaniz's word choice struck Owen as intriguing. He'd have expected the glorified model to use words like nicer, cleaner, more appealing, or even sexier. Safer implied that his first concern was for the job the uniform denoted, not how it made him look. Owen had known heroes who wouldn't have said safer. Again, he felt his respect for the wavy-haired young man raise a few degrees. Even if he was only playing a part, he played it exceptionally well. It was on the third floor that their streak of finding everyone safely removed came to a halt. They'd just come off the stairs when Owen heard muffled screaming coming from a few apartments away. His hearing was good, above human grade, but not so impressive that it would count as an ability on its own, so he could also make out sounds of someone scuffling about. "We've got people," he declared, alerting Galvanized while taking to careful but sizable steps toward the apartment that the noise was coming from. A single attempt on the doorknob told him it was locked, and he could see keyholes for 3 deadbolts. He reared back his hefty fist and prepared to turn the door into splinters. "Tighten hold." Galvaniz's order was curt and quick-spoken, with the sort of veteran authority that reminded Owen of his intern days. "Time is short, but we don't know where they are behind that door. You punching it could seriously injure someone." "Got a better idea?" "Yes, actually, you're incredibly strong, so just stick a finger through the door and run it down past where the knob and deadbolts are. That should let us in without sending chunks flying through the home." Owen bit back a terse remark and did as he was told. It was easy, like sticking a finger into putting the deadbolts. Put up a valiant effort to stop his index finger, but they may as well have tried to reason with a thunderstorm. In less than half a minute, the locks were removed. Galvanized moved forward, pushing the door open and stepping into the apartment's living room. The two men had both been in rescue situations before, and this was not the first fire for either, so they'd had certain expectations of what to find behind the door. A huddled, scared group of people awaiting rescue. A panicked cluster that would race forward and possibly knock their rescuers down, or even the worst-case scenario, one or more bodies that had already been claimed by smoke inhalation. This was none of those situations, not even close. A group of 4 adults were racing about, filling buckets from the sink and, judging by sound, the tub, emptying them onto a person in the center of the room, then repeating the process. This person in the center was young, roughly 7 to 9, if Owen had to guess, and sitting in a metal wash tub that was glowing from the heat. This heat wasn't from the fire that was engulfing the building. It came directly from the source. This young person, a girl, Owen realized as he noticed her hair and facial features, was the one who had released the muffled screams. They didn't seem to be ones of pain. That would have been impossible to bite back. No, these screams were likely of fear or guilt, some mixture containing elements of the two. She was clearly terrified, and Owen didn't blame her one bit, because in addition to sitting crying and screaming softly, the young girl was also engulfed in fire. Her whole body rippled with flame, cascading off and flowing to the world around her. "Shit," Galvanize said, taking a step back. "We've got a super." Owen didn't fault Galvanize for assuming they were dealing with a super. He was in a dangerous situation, and a super willfully causing fires would be his worst-case scenario. It meant he had to run like hell and leave these people behind because he wasn't cleared to stop a fire-coated arsonist. It was a reasonable leap to make, but it was wrong. There were things he recognized as a former hero and as a father that told him something was off. The blackened spots on the metal tub showed it had been used for similar purposes. Before the people, probably her family, were scared and frantic, but not lost in terror, and that meant this was something they'd come to terms with. The way the girl was sobbing and trying to bite back, her fear spoke volumes of how much she hated what was happening to her. Above all was the efficiency of the system they were using to douse her. This had been planned, worked on, and drilled. They knew she might start burning, and they had a method in place to deal with it. "She's not a super," Owen said, correcting his team leader. "She's a coward. She can't control it. You can't." Galvanize. His words trailed off as his brain finally snapped to the context clues Owen had already seen. Fear had made him momentarily slow. "Not stupid, Crud. I think you might be right." "I am right." Owen stepped forward, his large body's movement finally seeming to snap the people in the apartment to awareness of the costumed men's presence, one of the older men lowered his bucket and raced over to Owen. "No, go away." His voice was heavy with a Hispanic accent, and his stilted way of speaking made it clear he was still learning English. Once upon a time, one could have faked his way through some basic phrases, but Spanish was a skill he'd long ago let rust to oblivion on his mental shelf. Galvanized, thankfully, had not been so lax in his language exercises. He hurried over, immediately snapping into a quick, fluent conversation with the older man. Owen was impressed. The kid even rolled his R's, a trick Owen had never managed to get down. "I'm hitting a wall," Galvanized told him after a few moments of conversation. "They understand that the building is on fire, but they're refusing to leave. They seem to think we're here to take the girl away." He shot Owen, a confused expression visible even through the mask and breather apparatus on his face. "Any insight you want to offer?" Mirror fog really did keep you kids away from other supers, didn't he? Titan gave a small shake of his head. "Power with abilities that are a severe danger to others. Ones like hers are often put in protective custody until they find a way to let them safely interact with society. Usually some tech genius can slap a suit or something on them, but there's always rumors of people never being heard from again." Owen pointedly refrained from commenting on his own suspicions of the validity regarding those rumors. "There were more important things at the moment. I can see how he'd be worried about that," Galvanized said, sparing a moment to glance at the growing amount of fire filling the building. "But we need to get them out. I'm going to have to ask you to pick them up and remove them forcefully. You open to a suggestion?" "I'll hear it out," Galvanized assured him. "They're here to protect the girl. If I take her out, they'll follow on their own faster and safer." Owen pointed out. "True, but well, I guess you're allowed to deal with her. But be gentle, Power, or not, she's still a person." In that moment, Owen's grudging respect for the young man leading this team of corporate shills metamorphosed into genuine affection. "Job be damned, he liked this kid." "Don't worry," Owen assured him, stepping past the older man, still jabbering in a language he couldn't understand. Dimly, he felt a pair of hands grip his bicep, some poorly thought-out attempt at stopping him. His assailant, like countless others who'd tried such things before, was in for disappointment. Owen continued forward, kneeling down next to the metal tub and staring at the girl in the face. He smiled at her, his big, wide, corny grin that had endeared him to the hearts of the public so many years ago. It seemed he still had a bit of his old charming magic left, because the girl stopped crying long enough to turn and look at him. "Are you okay?" His voice was calm and gentle, ignoring the urgency of the situation around him. "No," she said, her words high-pitched, hoarse, and heartbreaking. "I can't stop this time. I keep trying, and it won't stop." "Don't worry," Owen assured her. "I'll get you out of here. We'll go out to your apartment's pool and help you cool down. Does that sound okay?" She shook her head fiercely. "I can't leave. I can't get up. I'll burn people. I've burned Papa and Mama and my sister and our house. I've burned everything with great care." Owen reached out his hand and brought it down on top of her head, momentarily smothering out the flames before they regrouped and dashed across his skin. The girl tried to pull away, but he held fast, holding his hand there long enough to send the message. Then he pulled it away and held his fingers in front of her face. "You can't burn me. I'm special like you. No matter how scared you get, no matter how hot you get, you can't hurt me. I promise." Her eyes grew wide, an unsettling sight, since they were still coated in flames, as she stared at his unmarred skin. Not even the hair from the back of his knuckles had been singed. She reached out and grasped his fingers with hers ever so carefully, and watched in amazement as the fire coating her failed to scorch him in the slightest. "Who are you?" "My name is Titan." "What's yours?" "Alexandria." "Well, Alexandria, how about that swim?" She nodded, and he reached over, delicately scooping her out of her metal wash tub and pulling her against his chest. His uniform crackled and wrinkled as she came into contact with it, but his words held true as the fire proved unable to burn him. "Ready when you are," Titan told Galvanize, who gave a quick nod and hurriedly escorted the rest of the apartment's occupants to the stairs. Titan followed, even more careful with his steps than before. It took a good 10 minutes of submersion in the apartment complex's pool, now partially filled with ash, before Alexandria's cloak of flames started to dissipate. Titan spent that time talking with her, asking her about life and school, pretending he wasn't, gently holding her face above water while the rest of her body sent steam billowing into the late morning air. Before taking her out of the building, he wrapped her in his fire-resistant overshirt, illustrating one of the many reasons that heroes always dressed in layers. It had held up well, which was a stroke of good fortune, because he was relatively certain she'd have torched through anything else he could have used. Having fathered Powers, Titan was more familiar with their condition than most. Their abilities were triggered involuntarily sometimes. This response was purely physical, like a nervous tic. Sometimes it happened from other stimuli like sneezing, and for many their ability was tied to their emotions. So while the water was keeping Alexandria from burning anything else, Titan had a firm suspicion that it was the act of calming her down that finally banished the flames. The rest of the team had finished checking the building and reported there were no more people left inside. Only Alexandria's family had stayed behind too, scared to move her and perhaps set something else aflame. With the coast clear, the firefighters had pulled out and focused on getting the blaze under control. Galvanized Hexcellent Bubble and Zone had all gathered out in front of the smoking building to catch the eye of various reporters and news crews that were gathering on the scene. Technically, Titan should be with them, but he felt he was doing better work standing waist deep in dirty water, getting a little girl down from her emotional roller coaster. Titan, the powered girl's transport is en route. Estimate arrival in 5.2 minutes. Dispatch's voice hummed in his ear, nearly startling him. He'd forgotten about the earpiece already. It would take some time for the hero habits to kick back, and at least he'd remember to call the incident and a person with her ability and no control needed some serious help. Understood. Titan tapped the side of his mask, covering his ear. As Alexandria looked on curiously, he stuck out his thumb and pinky, making an "I'm on the phone" gesture to explain his apparent discussion with no one. The secondary transport as well. Yes, another car for the girl's family is paired with the one for her. They will not be able to ride in the same vehicle. Titan smiled down at the girl, but inwardly winced if he threw her into a mysterious van without so much as a friendly face. It was highly likely she would flare up again. The team getting her would have things to control her fire, but it wouldn't be a great first impression. I can accompany. There shouldn't be any danger for me. It was never an issue of danger. We have equipment to completely neutralize a fire conjurer of the level you describe. However, that equipment occupies a large amount of space. We cannot fit anyone in the van aside from the driver and the power. Damn, there went that idea. If a normal person couldn't fit, then Titan had no chance of squeezing in. He was still trying to think of another way to help when Dispatch's voice grabbed his attention again. Titan, another hero has flagged your location as a destination. Gale is currently en route. Make that arrive. The new voice came from a source high above the pool, a woman floating 40 feet in the air. She wore a green and black outfit, standard pants and top paired with a matching ankle-length coat. It fluttered out behind her, billowing in the breeze. As she began to descend, she was halfway down when Titan realized there was no breeze. That probably meant air elementalist, and if she had enough oomph to fly herself without riding on something as ostentatious as a hurricane, then she must be a pretty good one. Her brunette hair flitted about as she descended, coming to rest a few inches below her shoulders when she finally landed. Gale, I presume. The woman. Gale nodded and then flashed a warm smile at Alexandria. She turned her attention back to the man in the suit-covered outfit a moment later. And you're Titan, or so I'm told that I am. From what I heard, Titan left the business years ago. So that leaves me with a question, original or legacy? Her tone was cheerful, and the smile she'd shown Alexandria had only faded a bit, yet Titan could still sense the tension in her body as she quizzed him. He didn't blame her. The return of someone as legendarily infamous as himself was bound to stir up a lot of something. Maybe it would be bad, maybe it would be good, but it would be something. Original. Titan replied, just reinstated. Actually, you caught me on my first job, a burning building. Interesting choice for a strong man. Long story, Titan said with a sigh. Are you really? Gale. This question came from neither of the registered heroes, but rather from the small girl who had finally stopped burning a few minutes prior. Both adults looked at her, realizing they had something more important on their hands than a pissing contest. I really am, Gale told her. She took a step off the edge of the concrete and began to hover over the water, making small ripples below her feet as she glided across the water's surface. See, I can fly and everything. Seeing her interact kindly with Alexandria, it struck Titan that Gale was quite pretty. A fact that was evident even through the mask that concealed all save for her eyes, a bit of nose, and from the mouth downward dark skin, full lips, and likely a fit body beneath all the armored clothing she wore. If his inclinations had lain in that direction, he'd have been a bit tempted to ask for her number. "You came to speak at our school last year," Alexandria said. "You talked about how being a hero meant making good choices even for young people like us." "And I meant every word," Gale assured her. Alexandria nodded. Even though nothing had been asked of her, the girl was clearly starstruck. Titan would have bet dollars to donuts that somewhere in the cinders of her now charred room were the remains of a Gale poster. That thought, sad as it was, gave him an idea. "Gale, maybe you can help me us out," he said carefully. "I've got friends who are coming to take Alexandria and her family somewhere secure, where she won't have to worry about setting things on fire. Unfortunately, her car will be too small for anyone else to ride with her, but I want her to know she's still got people watching over her. Are you free to fly alongside her car and make sure she arrives safely?" "Of course I can," Gale said, giving the young girl another comforting smile. "That works out well, actually. I wanted to see if you had some free time later on to chat, so now we can meet up after, and I can assure you everything went fine." Titan had known he was handing out a favor by asking her to do escort duty, but he hadn't expected her to cash it in immediately. Clearly she wanted to know about his return as soon as possible. From the way Alexandria had recognized her and her skill at diplomacy, it seemed a fair guess that she was one of the better-known heroes in the city, which meant she likely also belonged to one of the top teams. He'd hoped to avoid getting too mixed up in the hero world before he settled in here, but it looked like that wasn't going to happen. Oh well, at least he was going to get something out of it. "Sounds like a great idea," Titan agreed. "Nice job, Mr. Green," was the first thing the team saw. When they stepped through the door of their base, he stood between the living room and the kitchen wearing an almost aggressively neutral expression. "Thank you, sir," Galvanize responded immediately. "We were thankful to get everyone out with no injuries or deaths." "It was a good day." "Very good," Mr. Green amended. "The firefighters actually went on record thanking you for your help." The footage of Zone leaping into the building is being picked up by a station running the story, and the post-rescue photos came out looking quite striking. Owen wondered how this man knew so much about pictures he hadn't taken and stations he didn't run, then let the curiosity slide away. This place had a lot of money, and Owen had been around more than long enough to know that with the right amount of cash, there was almost nothing one couldn't access. Unfortunately, our newest team member wasn't present in any of the group photos. Mr. Green's face was still neutral, his tone still even, yet one could feel the disapproval radiating off of him. "Titan, you understand that as hero liaison to this team, you're expected to appear alongside them, don't you?" "I know what I signed up for, and I've got no issue with that when time permits. My priority was taking care of a little girl who couldn't stop herself from radiating fire. Once she was safe, I went to join in the photo shoot, but it had already wrapped up. A girl radiating fire." "Galvanize, please explain." Mr. Green said. "There was a power in the building. She seemed to be cloaked in flames and was unable to extinguish herself." Titan secured her, calmed her down, and arranged for her to be transported somewhere safe where she wouldn't present a danger to herself or others. He prioritized it as higher importance than dealing with the media, and I agreed. Left unattended, she could have injured someone or started a new blaze. Owen felt a spark of surprise at Galvanize's words. That was only somewhat how it had happened. In truth, he'd just taken the girl down and Galvanize hadn't stopped him. But this made it sound like the actions of Titan had been done at Galvanize's orders. The kid was putting himself on the chopping block instead of Owen. Mr. Green stared at the two men for a long moment. "And why couldn't Hexcellent have had one of her demons restrain the child? They are also fireproof, as well as less necessary to be seen on camera." "The fire was coming from fear," Owen said, "not about to let Galvanize try and absorb any more blame. Power's abilities often tied to their emotions. She was scared because she lost control, and that fear fed her ability, causing a chain reaction that almost torched a whole building. Excellence demons aren't what anyone would call child-friendly, so I seemed like a smarter pick for calming her down." Mr. Green remained silent for a few seconds, then seemed to relax. "Very well, our first job is to provide emergency services, and it appears your choices were made with the public safety in mind. So missing a photo op is an acceptable loss. Just make sure everyone, Titan included, writes up their standard post-response report, every detail, every action, every name of every person encountered. There were no injuries today, but we all know that doesn't preclude reports surfacing later. Good day. Mr. Green strolled out of the room, eyes staring straight ahead as he headed down the hall. What's this about reports now? Owen looked around, finding that the rest of the team didn't seem to share his confusion. Post-response reports, Galvanize told him. Peers are big targets. For the occasional lawsuit, we'll have people we pull out of cars claim we caused exacerbations to their injuries, or that our presence made things worse. Stuff like that. The company can usually beat them with telepaths, but those can get muddy legally speaking, so one of the ways they combat it is to have us document everything we did. A lot of lawsuits have fallen apart when the person's story didn't match up at all to what we recorded. Sounds like a massive pain in the asso. And sad, no one mentioned paperwork. Why don't you blow it off then like you did doing camera work? Zone had been silent for most of the trip back, but it was immediately clear that it hadn't been because he had nothing to say. Just let Galvanize stand in for you again. God forbid the legendary hero cop up to his own. Fuck you, PS Zone. That's enough, Galvanize snapped. No, let him go. Owen patted Galvanize's shoulder, then turned to face Zone, looking the younger man in the eye. Required Owen to tilt his head at a noticeable incline. He's been biting back his tongue since I got here. That shit isn't healthy. Come on, kid. If you've got something to say, then say it gladly. I think it was a mistake to bring you on. Mirror Fog was a hero, but he wasn't like you. He was a decent guy, humble, never looking down on us. But you, from the minute you stepped in here, you've acted like Babe Ruth sitting at a t-ball game. Missing the photo op is just one more example of the real problem. You think you're better than us. You didn't want to be seen with us. And while I'm used to that from heroes, to see it from you just chaps my ass, because you are in no fucking way better than us. Zone's face was red, a vein bulging near the top of his forehead. He looked half ready to swing. Likely the only thing holding him back was the knowledge that it would injure his hand if he struck Titan's legendary tough body. Owen leaned closer until he was less than a foot from the fuming man's face. And what Bertel makes me so much worse than the other heroes, because you're a goddamn coward. Zone spun around and stormed out of the living room, off toward the gym. Owen stood there frozen in place. He'd expected any number of things to come out of Zone's mouth: bigotry, arrogance, outright hate, but he hadn't been braced for that little bastard to cut to the quick of him. Coward, that was what he called himself countless times over his years in exile. He tormented himself with that word for so long, but it had been a private pain. It had genuinely never occurred to him that others would see his failings all on their own. Ignore Zone. He's got a short fuse and an ego bigger than he needs, Galvanized said. He'll calm down once I explain that you skipping the photos wasn't a personal slight. It's fine, Owen said at last. He looked over it. Hadn't escaped his notice that while Galvanize was keeping the peace, Hexcellent and Bubble had both remained silent after Zone's rant. One look at their faces told him why they agreed with their teammate. Maybe not about him being worse than other heroes, but certainly about him thinking he was too good for them. And they weren't really wrong, were they? He had been thinking that way ever since Lenny handed him their folder. I promise we'll get things smoothed out. Just show me where to get one of those report things, Owen said, and Galvan's eyes went quiet. Please, I want to get it done with. As much as he would have liked to sink into a funk over his lifetime of failings, when needed to knock the paperwork out as soon as possible. Little as he felt like going, he still had to meet with Gale. There were all sorts of hero-themed bars and restaurants. Supper with supers, capes, and cocktails, and Planet Hero were only some of the more nationally franchised ones. For the most part, they were horrendously tacky affairs, with staff wearing costumes and walls decorated in art featuring heroes or sometimes vintage hero memorabilia. In larger cities, heroes would frequent these establishments in costumes, stopping in to have a quick beer or bite, then sign autographs for the adoring fans. Such appearances were of course purchased by the respective establishment and carefully scheduled. They wanted patrons to think that any trip could lead to meeting a real-life hero in the flesh. Off-duty heroes or ones not contractually obligated to show up avoided those places, like they'd seen the kitchen. A real hero bar was one that catered to them when the capes were office type of bar masqueraded as unassuming watering holes of place, akin to a dive without the rustic charm. There was of course no way to turn away non-heroes without advertising what clientele they actually catered to. Instead, the staff made sure regular people didn't want to stay horrid service flat beer at room temperature, and food that would turn a garbage disposal stomach ensured that if you weren't supposed to be at a hero bar, it wasn't a place you felt inclined to linger. Owen felt the assessing stares as he stepped through the door of Bryn's Gate, a small bar 20 minutes jog from base. He was dressed in street clothes, as was everyone else here. Stepping into a place like this wearing a costume would have defeated the whole point. The staff, sizing him up from afar, could clearly see he was big, but big might only mean he was a super, not a hero. And even that required some assumptions. He'd probably be stuck getting treated like a mundane until Gale arrived and vouched for him. Hey, over here. A breeze hit his left ear, and Owen turned to find Gale standing up at a booth and waving him over. He noticed the staff relax, accepting him as a proper client. It usually took more than a wave to do that. Either this place had lax standards, or Gale had more clout than Owen realized. He lumbered across the room and slid onto the bench that awaited him. Instead of the usual groans and creaks he was accustomed to from furniture, the seat held firm. That was one thing about hero bars: they either started out with reinforced furniture or very quickly learned to get some. Gale was dressed in slacks and a blouse, the sort of outfit that said she might have just gotten off work or might be heading out for a proper dinner after her drink. In front of her was a cocktail halfway watered down by the melted ice. Been waiting long? I had another meeting here earlier, so I just hung around for this one, Gale replied. I appreciate you being prompt. Of course, we all have our schedules to keep. The waitress came by and Owen ordered a local beer. Once she left, he turned the conversation toward the most important subject. So far as he was concerned, everything go okay with Alexandria. No issues. She made it to the facility without so much as a flare-up. I think it helped that she was a little starstruck. Gale was keeping a neutral face while she examined Owen with a 10 of eyes. I'm surprised you care so much about one powered girl. First job back, haven't had time to get jaded again yet. Owen's beer arrived and he took a long draw from it. Dark, yeasty, and potent. He'd have to find out the name of the brewery so he could try more of their wares. About that, I was wondering what made you decide to leave retirement and why you picked Brewster, Illinois to reappear in. Of all places, we're a decent-sized city, but we're no New York or Los Angeles. I left retirement because I wanted to start doing some good again. Oh, and sad as for why I came here, my agent had set up shop locally, and this is where I got a job. You're on a team. On the urge to lie or at least tell half-truths was almost overpowering, but Zone's words were still ringing in Owen's ears. He thought he was better than them, and what right did he have? Those kids didn't have his power or training yet. They were still doing the best they could to help people. Meanwhile, he'd taken all his abilities and holed up in Colorado like a coward. I'm working as a hero liaison for a team of privately employed emergency response supers. I'm also going to do a little hero work when time permits, but they're my main job. Gale stared at him, then let out a short, sharp laugh. How you expect me to believe that? Titan the Titan finally came out of hiding just to lead a bunch of corpies. I'm not an idiot, no. You're the leader of Elemental Fury, one of the most well-known teams in Brewster. It's been in existence for over 2 decades, and you're the 4th leader they've had presiding for the last 3 years. Your team is efficient, skilled, and great at minimizing collateral damage, which is probably part of why you're so liked by the citizens. It also means you're on top, which makes you a target for criminals and heroes more concerned with image than the job. You think I'm the latter? Owen had done more than just paperwork in his time before the meeting. He'd also picked up some background information on Gale. Knowledge was usually more useful than muscle, and his experience. Titan was quite a media juggernaut in his day. I find it hard to believe you plan on lying low. Seems like you might want to be the new big dog in town, and the only way someone with your rep could do that would be to make us look bad. I'm not here for the media, and I'm sure as shit not a gunner who is going to sabotage your PR. Those guys don't last as long as I did before I quit. And you know that I'm not sure what I know when it comes to you. Gale said, nearly every piece of information I have on you is from hearsay and propaganda. The only thing I do know is that you are powerful and experienced, which makes you dangerous only if I come with ill intentions, which I don't. Why should I believe that you come here and feed me a story about babysitting corpies, giving me nothing to go on? I'm not trying to be a bitch titan, but this is my city. I was born here, I grew up here, and I lay my life on the line every day to keep it safe. Glory seekers are a real danger. They take stupid risks that get people killed. For someone on your scale of power, that could be a whole lot of people. Gale, you can either trust me or not. What you can't do is stop me. Owen meant it in a general sense, but he saw her tense. She probably had a hurricane ready to go the moment he made a sudden move. I mean that in a technical way. I've got my certification and my license until I do something worthy of bringing before the DVA. I'm free to fulfill my hero duties as I see fit. I can make it hard on you. That just gets us into a stupid feud, and I don't need that kind of headache. Owen replied, here's what I'd suggest instead. Watch me let my actions tell you if I'm here to hunt glory or here to help. If I fuck up, then you've got something to bring before the DVA. If not, well, maybe along the way you'll realize I'm telling the truth. You know damned well I was going to put surveillance on you anyway. Gale gulped down the last of her drink, half-melted ice cubes, and all it might have occurred to me. Owen gave a lopsided grin and finished his own drink. All right, I'll back off for now on one condition. Let's hear it. I want you to come by my base for an ability assessment. Gale replied, I'll feel more comfortable once I know what you can do, and it'll be interesting to see how my team stacks up against the legend. I'd have to schedule it around my own team. I wasn't kidding about them being my priority. Understood. We'll shake our schedules and make something work. Bring them along if you like. Might be a thrill for them to see what a real hero team looks like. For a reason Owen couldn't yet define. That comment rankled him. I'll find a time. Hate to tell you this though, but you were wrong about one thing. What's that? Gale asked. Once you've seen what I can do, comfortable is the last thing you'll be feeling. 14. The powerful knocking on his door roused Lenny from a pleasant dream. In it, he'd been just about to sign 3 coordinated hero teams under a group contract with a percentage that was so high he'd have never allowed himself to indulge it in real life. The caped leader had been putting his signature on the contract when he jerked, slamming his knee into the desk. Then he did it again and again, over and over, until Lenny tore free of his dream world and realized someone very strong was knocking on his door. It took him exactly one guess to figure out who'd come a-calling. Truthfully, he'd expected this visit to come earlier. Give me a damn minute. Lenny rolled out of bed and put on his orthopedic slippers. Other men might have been embarrassed to greet a visitor comparable to the gods while wearing gray house shoes. Other men lacked the brass-balled confidence of Lenny. He trudged through his home, a one-bedroom apartment next door to his office, heading toward the door. Lenny could certainly afford better. One didn't get to be as renowned as he was without squirming away a good nest egg after all. But that was for when he retired. Lenny lived and breathed the job. You had to if you wanted to be good at it. The closest thing he'd had to a vacation in the last decade was when he went to the coast to bail one of his clients out of a drunken indecent exposure charge. The knocking ceased as Lenny pulled open the door, revealing the mountainous form of Owen holding a 12-pack. Can I come and wipe your feet? Lenny trudged back in, heading for the kitchen. He heard the door close behind him as he reached into the fridge and pulled out one of the frozen coffee drinks his doctor said was bad for his stomach lining. Tough shit, duck, he muttered as he downed the frosty concoction. That done, Lenny walked back into the living room. So I take it things are bad. He'd known Owen long enough to skip the preamble. The big lug was bothered about something, and Lenny was the only person he felt he could talk to. That in itself pretty much spoke to the problem. He wasn't getting on well with his new team, else he'd have been talking to them. They're not great. Owen cracked open a beer and took a lengthy sip. His body had long ago lost the ability to be affected by alcohol. That didn't mean he didn't find enjoyment in the flavor, though. Looks like I've alienated my team by acting like I'm better than them. One member seems to have hated me before I walked in the door, and I managed to catch the eye of Elemental Fury's leader, Gale. She seems to think I'm here to cause waves and might just make it her goal to be a pain in my ass. That is pretty damn not great. Lenny agreed. He reached over and pulled a beer free from the case if the man was going to barge into his home at almost midnight. The least he could do was share his drinks. Not great, but not unmanageable either. Gail is a righteous bitch if she suspects someone of making trouble. However, she's one of the best people to have in your corner if she trusts you. One of your clients know, though I manage birds, man, and granted to people on her team, I'm involved enough to get a sense of her. Ladies got a lot of pressure on her to perform, and Brewster has been growing more active with criminal supers over the last few years. Once she sees you're genuinely trying to help, she back off. Until then, just keep your temper in check and try to keep the dick measuring to a minimum. Might be tough. She invited me over to do an ability assessment. Lenny held in the exasperated sigh that might have escaped from an individual less tenured in his role. Ability assessments were officially used by heroes when they were looking to work with someone and needed to know exactly what that person was capable of. Unofficially, they were a great way to put rookies in their place or settle grudges of which super was more powerful. Heroes were good folk, but that much power and training definitely resulted in equally superhuman egos. Did you agree? Sort of. I said I would do it when schedules aligned, so I bought some time at least. Owen gave a wide-shouldered shrug. It'll have to be enough. Let me try and finagle a few things until you hear from me. Focus on your real problem, the team. That's the one I'm most clueless about. Owen admitted, I know I'm pissing them off by acting like I'm better than them, but the thing is that I am better. I've got more power, more training, and more experience. Even with my time away from the life, they're good kids, and I respect Galvanize's attitude, but at the end of the day, we exist on totally different levels. I have no idea how to make that gap disappear, and if I try to fake it, I'm pretty certain they'll hate me even more. No, don't fake it, Lenny advised. These folks already get shit on by heroes who see them as sell-out wannabes. If you start acting fake, they'll think it means you've decided to placate them like children. Then what's my other option? Tell them the truth, Lenny replied. Meet it head on like you would any other challenge. Let them know you're having trouble fitting in like you told me, except maybe don't be quite such a dick about it then. And this is the key: realize what a fucking schmuck you're being. Schmuck Titan, you're a great hero and an all-around unstoppable guy. No one could do your job like you, Lenny said. He ran his hand through the wisps of hair that remained on his bald head. This part would require careful wording. Think, but do you think you could do my job? Be an agent? Yes, be an agent. Handle PR disasters, coach rookies how to deal with the spotlight, wake up to console grown men who show up with beer in the middle of the night. Do you think you could do my job better than I do? Lenny was wide awake now, locking eyes with the man who could kill him in a single motion and refusing to blink. Of course not. I mean, you're Lenny. Good. There's a bit of humility left in that skull of yours. Lenny let the staring contest lapse and leaned back into his chair. Titan, you're a fucking beast of a hero. Never let anyone tell you different. Thing is, your job is not to be a hero, not with this team. Your job is to be their liaison, and you kind of suck at that job. Being a good hero is a wonderful achievement, but it doesn't automatically make you the best at everything. It just means when a super needs putting down, you're the guy we call. If you need an agent, you call me, and if your toilet won't flush, you call a plumber. None of us is inherently better. Some jobs are just more prestigious. I get it. Just because I'm good at my job doesn't mean I'm better at theirs. Owen had the sense to look at least somewhat ashamed. You're damn right. So my advice to you is to get to know these people. Find out all the areas where they can smoke your ass. Learn to respect them because they deserve it, and the rest of your problems will solve themselves. Thanks, Lenny. I don't know what I'd do without you. Owen stood up to go, reaching for his beer. Leave the case, Lenny instructed. That's quality stuff. And I have some new clients coming by tomorrow that I'd like to woo. Your midnight consultation rates have gone up, Owen said. Economy is a bitch, Lenny replied. Now go home and sleep. You're going to need your rest because you've got a lot of crow to eat in the morning. When Hexcellent walked into the living room the next morning, she was struck with a smell that was foreign and familiar all at once. She'd been with Mortmain Holdings as a peer for over 2 years, subject to their rules, restrictions, and endless examinations. One aspect of that included a carefully controlled and monitored diet to ensure that everyone on the Team looked camera ready at all times. This meant that in her time doing the job she'd somehow managed to forget this heavenly aroma's source. As a result of scarcity this morning though, the memory came flooding back as she witnessed Titan add his latest batch of flapjacks to an already sizable stack. Morning he greeted, I made pancakes. He was dressed in sweats again, though this time they were topped with a cream-colored apron that was far too small for him. This was no surprise. Excellent. Recognized it from their linen closet. It was a communal apron they used when cooking, and no one else on the team had the same proportions. As Titan galvanizes going to fucking shit when he sees those. Excellence, said, walking over to examine Titan's culinary efforts. She was clad in a black tank top and silk pajama pants with silver spider webs stitched across the legs, attire demonstrating her intention of lazing about for as long as she was able. Why am I going to shit? Galvanized stepped in from the hallway. Unlike the other two, he was fully dressed for the day. And what's that smell? Pancakes, Zone told him. He and Bubble were directly behind Galvanize. Evidently, the trio had just finished something and were coming toward the kitchen together. Galvanized frowned, the expression strange on his perpetually positive face. Titan, we can't have pancakes. They aren't on the approved dietary restriction list. These are there some sort of hippie whole grain, low gluten, low taste clusterfuck. But they passed the bar for acceptable breakfast. I even checked it out with green first. That was quite kind of you. Galvanize headed over with Bubble trailing close behind. Zone took his own time in crossing the room. It wouldn't have been much of an apology if I made you something you couldn't eat. And that's what these are, apology pancakes. Last night I went for a walk and did a lot of thinking. What I ended up with was the realization that Zone was right. I have been thinking that I'm better than you, for which is stupid. You kids, sorry, you for do a damn respectable job, and I've got no right putting myself above you just because we have different career histories. Nice words, Zone said, but they don't mean shit. Without action, Zone, control yourself. Galvanized chided. Our teammate just gave an honest apology and is trying to make amends. That is not the sort of thing we stomp down regardless of our personal feelings. Let it go. I think Zone and I are going to have to square on some different issues sooner or later. The last of the pancakes were pulled from the griddle and slid onto a waiting plate already piled high. But he's dead right about words meaning nothing without action, which is why I'd like you all to know something. My real name is Owen Daniels. Zone's mouth had already been open, ready to snap something at him, but the words rotted on his tongue. Revealing one's name was far more personal than a face. Faces were changeable, and concealable names were dangerous. Names opened the door to research, to history, to learning everything there was to know about a person. It was widely regarded as fact that the only people heroes shared their real names with were their families and their teams. Tight Owen, that gesture means the world to us. Galvanized said. Truly it does. It's just a name, Owen replied. The pancakes are the good gesture, or as good as this healthy stuff can be. I already stuck some of those juices you stock and chunks of fruit on the table. I thought we could all have a team breakfast, then move on to the next part of my efforts to stop acting like a prick. More than healthy pancakes and name dropping, sir, you do us too much honor. Excellent said. Despite her words, she did come over and help him with two of the pancake-bearing plates. What can I say? I'm a giver by nature. Foul-mouthed and strange way of dress aside, Owen enjoyed his gothy teammate. She had this sort of spitfire nature. He'd always been fond of. Hell, he'd liked one woman with it so much he'd managed to convince himself he loved her enough to marry. So what's the plan? Then Bubble took her seat at the table, piling her plate with mostly fruits and veggies alongside a single pancake. That's up to you four, Owen said, putting far more than one pancake on his plate. Health assurances aside, he suspected the bulk of the eating would fall on his ample shoulders. I want to learn about each of you, understand how everyone works on their own as well as on our team. I don't even know what your jobs entail outside of actual response work, and that's something that needs rectifying. Sounds like setting you up for a shadow day is the best option, Galvanize said. Unfortunately today I've got a debrief meeting about yesterday's fire. Even if I thought it would be educating, only the team's leader is allowed to attend. Bubble, how about you photo shoot? He's welcome to tag along, but it's just going to be posing for 5 or 6 hours. Let's call that our last resort, Galvanized said. He looked over at Zone, who was silently stuffing food into his mouth while purposely avoiding any eye contact with Owen. had he been only a tenth of the leader he was galvanized would still have. Seeing that situation for the train wreck represented, instead he turned his gaze to the girl with ink bottle black hair. "Excellent, what have you got today?" "Decent assortment," she replied, mouth half full of berries and pancake, doing a store promo. Then a mini photo shoot with Spider plus a small branding meeting, all that paired with the usual shit. Of course. Well, Titan, if you really want to learn more about what we do when not saving people, I think Hexalin is your best shot today. That work for you? If she doesn't mind, I'd love to tag along." Owen said, "Fine by me." Excellent replied, "It'll be nice to have someone to carry my bags other than Big Henry. He scratches up damn near everything he touches." Owen was surprised to find a car waiting for him, and Hexalin. They'd finished breakfast and gotten into their respective costumes, then headed down to the street level. Hexalin walked without pause to a dark sedan idling at the curb. "You don't drive company policy." Excellent. Side 2 years ago, one of their former peers got into a fender bender with some old lady. She developed back problems, went after him and Morton in court, and generally drummed up a lot of bad press, not to mention drained some cash out of their pockets. Now we're only allowed to use a car service unless we're driving to an actual response, and the approved vehicle keeps us from being liable, also keeps you from going anywhere they don't know about." Owen added, "For a guy whose whole career is built on having Armageddon-level muscles, you're pretty quick on the uptake." Excellent climbed into the back seat, followed by her massive co-worker, and the car maneuvered back into traffic. "I'm actually not Armageddon," Owen told her once they were buckled up. Laws were laws, even if he was effectively invulnerable. The minute a hero began to think he was above them was the same moment his downfall began. "Really, I thought you were this legendary dude with impossible strength." "I am, but that doesn't change the fact that it's pretty much impossible for a strong man to be considered an Armageddon-class threat. We just don't have the damage capacity." Excellent cocked her head to the side. Today's blasting of makeup made her look like a somewhat befuddled bat. "Damage isn't the rating system like a power level thing?" "No, but a lot of people mistake it for that, even some heroes." Owen tried to cross his legs in an effort to find a more comfortable position, but this only resulted in him slightly bending the window lever. "People have tried putting a level system in place plenty of times. Actually, it just never holds up. First off, we're always learning about new people and powers that make us rethink things in terms of scale. Plus, it always goes to shit in that lots of powers negate or overwhelm each other. For example, a good telekinetic can knock most strong men out of a battle by lifting them off the ground, even if the strong man would be rated higher in terms of raw power. You're explaining to me how there's no level system to help me understand the level system." Excellent pointed out, "I've got some old algebra teachers you'd fit in just great with." "Sorry, I just wanted to show why measuring supers by level doesn't work. What you can measure regardless of their power is their capacity for destruction. As I recall, the default rule is it's how much damage a super could do if left unchecked for an hour." Sounds sort of morbid, and that's coming from a girl wearing zombie-themed lipstick. "Oh," and nodded. "You won't hear me disagreeing. It serves a purpose, though knowing someone's class tells you how dangerous they are. It informs on how we prioritize protecting civilians, minimizing property damage, and escalating force. There's minimal need to try to cripple or kill a standard class threat if subduing is an option. What if they're higher up the chain? Then we do what has to be done. No hero, at least none that lasts, enjoys that part of the job. But if we don't stop them, innocent people will die. Personally, I always try to subdue or de-escalate first for anything below Armageddon class. Bear in mind, my power gives me that as an option. Others aren't so lucky." Jesus. And here I thought all you people there was pick kittens out of trees and foil bank heists. Hexaline's eyes were wide, creating a strange contrast between the whites of her sclera and the ink black of her makeup. PR departments try to de-emphasize that aspect of the job. Same as with cops, it might be necessary, but that doesn't mean people like to think about it. No shit. Excellent turn to look out the window for a bit, watching the buildings roll by. "So what are these classes then like? Where would I fit in?" "You'd be a standard class," Owen replied. "Most supers are. It means you can do some significant damage and are a danger to life. However, you're not a threat to a large-scale area. Great, I'm lowest rung actually. That would be the NTC class. It stands for non-threatening combatant, though we just call them Nox for short. That nickname comes from the fact that one little tap to the head can usually bring them down. They're supers whose abilities are in no way dangerous, meaning they have the same propensity for damage as regular human healers, people with low-caliber display abilities. That sort of thing, but healers become heroes. They can't be that weak. Excellent said it's not about weak or strong, just about immediate destructive potential, Owen reminded her. All right, so it goes NTC standard then. I'm guessing there's something between that and Armageddon to Steps Demolition class and Manhattan class demo, which is my actual classification, by the way, means a super could level several city blocks. If left unchecked, Manhattan means the level of destruction they can wreak would be roughly on par with a nuclear bomb. That's why supers like me never hit too high on the scale. We just can't cover enough ground to be considered a massive threat. Well, damn, here I thought we were at least getting a hot shit hero, and you're not even in the second to best class. Maybe we should see if Galvanize thinks you're really cut out for the penthouse. Excellent smiled at him, showing more warmth than she seemed to share with some of her other team members. You can try to throw me out, but I should warn you, I've kicked the dog shit out of countless Manhattans, and even a few Armageddons. They might be better at large-scale destruction, but I'm in the top when it comes to one-on-one, unless a telekinetic lifts you in the air. Excellent reminded him. I said that works on most strong men. I'm not among that number. That's so. Please enlighten me, great hero. What secret technique do you use for getting out of such a precarious situation? Owen reached into the belt of his uniform and pulled out a few steel balls roughly the size of marbles. I throw these at whoever lifts me. They'll at least break the person's concentration, and if I hit them, the problem pretty much takes care of itself. No way that works. I've seen a bunch of telekinetic heroes hold shields while doing other stuff. They could just block them. Owen slipped the balls back into his belt pouch and gave Excellent a smile. Of his own shields, like everything else in this world, can only take so much. Put enough force behind it, and the right blow can shatter them. You'd have to be throwing pretty damned hard. Unlike keeping my mouth shut, that's one of the few things I do well. Owen said the store promo, as Galvanize had called it, turned out to be little more than thankless glad handing at the opening of the latest fiery discussion. Excellent's most prominent sponsor. There was a small crowd there, no doubt drawn by the advertised sales and giveaways meant to promote the new store's presence in the South Brewster Mall. A small black tent was partially obscuring the mall's walkway. It housed the store's staff, along with several corporate representatives gathered to greet the eager shoppers. As a representative of Morton Holdings, the conglomerate that ultimately owned this rebellious company, Hexent was tasked with circulating through the meager audience. More people recognized her than Owen had expected. This mystery resolved itself when he glanced through the glass storefront and realized she was heavily featured in posters on the walls. Even those who didn't seem to recognize her greeted Hexent with some warmth, that is, the males among them did. Hexent was pretty in a way that appealed to the store's particular clientele. At the same time, the way she used the store's products still showcased her natural gifts. True, she wouldn't be winning any classic beauty pageants, even if she did scrub the makeup and tattoos away, but that was what they liked about her. She didn't look like a model grabbing a paycheck. She appeared to be the genuine article, since Owen had seen her dress in similar fashions, while on her off time, he had no reason to suspect that wasn't the case. Nice costume. Owen glanced down, noticing a gangly male somewhere in his teens staring up at him. Despite all the reasons he had to don his nondescript mask, Owen had shown up in full Titan uniform. He sat away from the corporate folks. As a hero, he needed to take care not to accidentally endorse their products, but he still drew attention as he towered over the rest of the crowd. Thanks. Do I look like the real deal? I mean, it's close, but the real Titan used bolder reds and had different stitching along the seams. Plus, he was taller. Not that you can really help that. Still, all in all, it's a commendable job. I bet you could win a few prizes at conventions if you attended. Owen suppressed the urge to frown as the teen wandered off to find a new novelty to occupy his time. Until the doors opened. On one hand, he was glad not to have been recognized. It helped that almost no one knew Titan was back, but taller, it was those damn television cameras, always choosing the perfect angles making him look like he was even bigger than he was. Anyone pieced together that you're the genuine article yet excellent asked, walking over with a water bottle in hand. It surprised him how few swears she'd used since they arrived, but he supposed even among this crowd certain personality aspects required corporate sanitization. Not so far, Owen replied, though that last kid said my costume was close, so that's progress. Hexalence snorted, trying not to spray water from her nose, then quickly turning away lest any of the audience should see her near mishap. It's your own fault, she said as she delicately wiped her face, careful not to smudge any makeup. You've got that gray mask, you could have come semi-incognito, forget it. I'm here with you, we're part of the team. Sooner or later people will realize that Hexalent and Titan are working together. Think of how thrilled these folks will be when they can say they were at the first public appearance. You severely overestimate how many fucks are given about our team. Hexant caught the curse only after it had exited her mouth and glanced around frantically to make sure no one else had heard. What I mean is, yes, they'll shake my hand and all, but at the end of the day, that has way more to do with my face and body than with my professional exploits. Same is true for everyone on the team. I disagree, Owen replied. You all save lives for a living. Just because this group doesn't understand and respect that doesn't mean there aren't others. Who do I bet at least one kid you've pulled out of a wrecked car or burning building has a poster of you over his bed. Trust me, I've seen the sales numbers, and statistically your statement is probably true. Personally, I try not to think about all the other posters of me that get sold, to people who don't know my name. Gives me the creepy shivers. One of the men wearing a collared shirt with the fiery discussion emblem on it was waving. Hectic back over. It seemed they were nearly ready to open the doors, meaning Hectic had to stand by to do another round of greetings and handshakes that lingered a bit too long. Owen watched her leave when his ears suddenly pricked up. Titan, are you able to take assignments? He didn't jump in surprise at Dispatch's voice humming in his ear this time. Maybe he would get the hang of this again sooner than he thought. By plugging his earpiece in that morning, he'd put himself on the grid of heroes without going officially active. While he didn't anticipate a need so great they had to rally coverage, it was still his obligation to be prepared for such things. Owen pulled a cell phone from his pocket and stuck it to his ear before he spoke. No need to make people worry that the enormous muscle-bound man was also having a psychotic break. I'm working as a hero liaison right now, so I'm not taking assignments unless there's a severe shortage or tremendous threat. Then I'll do my part. A slight pause came before Dispatch's reply. Status recorded. There is a disturbance some distance from you. It is escalating, but the responding heroes are establishing control. Should you be needed, teleportation will be arranged. If you hear nothing from me in the next 15 minutes, consider the issue resolved. Gotcha. What is this situation anyway? Mechanical constructs with capable weaponry and high levels of adaptability appeared and began wreaking property damage roughly 10 minutes ago. In the southwestern area of the city, elemental fury has now arrived on the scene and diminished their numbers by 40%. Likelihood of your needed intervention is dropping. But stay ready, of course. Owen put the phone away since their conversation had momentarily ended. Dispatch wasn't really gone. She never stopped being right there. She was simply not talking, at least to him. If Elemental Fury Gale's team was as good as their reputation, then he probably wouldn't be needed. Even knowing that, Owen looked around to find the most likely route of entrance for a teleporter to take in a real battle. Nothing was ever certain, no matter how good the heroes were. Hexalent looked up from her crowd and flashed him a pained "Oh God, how much longer do I have to do this?" grin. He responded with a small wave, doing all he could to tamp down the sudden spike of pre-battle anxiety rising in his gut. 18. When Dispatch's voice crackled in Owen's ear, they were outside the mall, only a few yards from the town car that would whisk them away to their next location. Titan, you have hostile constructs closing on your location. Elemental Fury LED. The counter-attack to wipe out the first wave, but a second appeared and scattered in various directions. One cluster is on a path that will intersect with your location in less than 5 minutes. Can you respond? Owen had stopped walking when he heard Dispatch speak, causing Hexalent to shoot him a look of confusion. He held up one finger, gave a small shrug of apology, then replied to Dispatch, One of the supers from my peers' team is with me. Do we have time to get her clear? Negative. The constructs caused several accidents leading to traffic congestion on every applicable route to safety. We have responders working on clearing roads, but until they're done getting in a car, we'll put her at higher risk. Excuse me, did you just ask if I could get clear? Excellent, said, narrowing her eyes and sticking a hand on her hip. If something's going down, I'm one of the people helping. Remember, dipshit, we've got robots, or something like it, less than 5 minutes away. If they come, it's possible they'll go after you, and I don't want to get you in trouble for engaging in combat. Owen explained. Unfortunately, the roads are jammed, so you're stuck here. Well, that sucks, but they're coming to us, right? That's what I'm told. Then if I get attacked, I can respond in self-defense. Just because we can't start shit doesn't mean we can't end it. When some other douche nozzle does a ride. Daring smile lit up her face at the prospect of sanctioned battle. Owen again found himself wondering why a woman like this hadn't found her way into the HCP. It was a curiosity that would have to be sated another time. All right, I'm ready to respond, and I've got a peers with me to help with the civilians. What can you tell me about these things? He turned away from Hexet, not because he thought his words would in any way be muffled, but rather as a polite way of indicating that he wasn't speaking to her. Dispatch didn't require any such indicator. She always knew what was external conversation and what was meant for her. It was one of the many strange yet useful aspects of the mysterious voice you have for heading toward your location. They have strength and resilience on par with a standard class strongman, laser weaponry on par with a standard class blaster, and reaction speed at elevated human levels, if that's all. Then I don't see why they cause such trouble. Owen prodded. They also show adaptability to tactics, learning from the mistakes of others. Given your skill set, I do not foresee it being an issue. The other unique capability of these constructs is that they show minor regeneration. Disabled units would re-enter combat after being left alone for some time. They cannot heal beyond complete dismemberment or destruction. However, Owen stretched out his arms, tensing every muscle from his shoulder to his fingers. After a moment, he rose up on his toes, adding his legs to the procedure. He felt the mild strain in his tendons, and for an instant, he was intimately aware of every fiber of muscle in his massive body. Ever so slowly, he released the stretch, pulling his arms back in and lowering down on his feet. It should only be a minute or so now. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and don't stop until they are scrapped at it. That will neutralize the threat. We have others trying to gain information out of their wreckage and systems, but I'm aware your talents lie in other directions. They have continued on their current course and will be breaking into your line of sight momentarily. With a squint of his eyes, Owen could make out the shimmering shapes of sizable humanoids running toward him. They were big, probably a little taller than he was. Not that it would help them. He pulled back his left leg and judged the distance. It had been a while since he'd pulled this trick. Owen hoped he hadn't lost the touch. Am I finally going to see the legendary Titan let loose on some motherfuckers? Excellent's tone was light, but she'd positioned herself several feet behind him. Her attention was split, eyes darting between her teammate and the mall entrance where shoppers were already beginning to line up and point. I'll do my best to put on a good show, but to be honest, this is probably going to be a pretty boring fight. Stay ready, though. If any of them get past me, you'll have to draw attention from the humans. Big Henry ain't exactly a subtle son of a bitch, if you hadn't noticed. Excellent replied. She hadn't summoned any of her demons yet, but Owen had seen how quickly she could pull them. It was the right call. Bringing them out might panic the civilians. Best to let him settle things quickly. With a nod to Excellent and a minor grunt born more out of habit than effort, Owen pushed against the concrete with enough power that it cracked under his boots. The force of the jump sent him sailing forward in an arc more long than high, carrying him across the parking lot to where four metal behemoths were just arriving on the asphalt. Whether by luck or skill, Owen hit his mark dead on landing, only a few feet away from the cluster of constructs. The concrete sprayed them as he effortlessly tore through it upon landing. Before any of them had a chance to register him as a threat, Owen sprang. He darted up to the two on the left and slammed a hand into the torso of each. Flexing his fingers, he easily shredded their armored facades and gripped the firm inner workings that kept them moving. His guests had been close on their size. Each was nearly half a foot taller than he was. Despite this, he showed No apparent effort as he lifted the two constructs off the ground, spread his arms, and then clapped them together like to high-tech tambourines. Sparks and shards of metal rained down on Owen, who ignored it all, just as he'd been ignoring the flailing blows that the Tabots had been pelting him with since he arrived. He pulled them apart and banged them together again and again and again. After the fourth strike, there was barely enough left to hold, let alone smash, so he dropped the remains of his first victims and turned to the other two. This was the first time one got a good look at them as he deformed the ones he held to quickly to get a mental picture. Each one possessed a small dome-like head, as though someone had spray painted a bowl and turned it upside down. They had awkward triangular torsos and forearms that were vastly oversized and out of proportion. That anomaly explained itself quickly as the one on his right raised its hands and fired red beams at Owen's chest. He'd forgotten Dispatch's warning about the lasers. Owen dashed forward to the one attacking him, ignoring the slightly singed smell of roasting costume, and grabbed it by one of its triangular shoulders. If the robot had the capability of feeling surprise, it certainly didn't get an opportunity to do so. With his other hand snaring its waist, Owen ripped the metal warrior in half as easily as one would tear serrated paper. Just for good measure, he quickly tore it into a few more pieces before scattering the remains about. With a whip of his arm spinning on his heel, he found the last one shuffling on its feet. Dispatch had said these things learned and were adaptable. It was probably trying to compute a strategy to overcome him. Good luck with that, Owen chuckled. The robot stopped shuffling for the barest of instant, and Owen pounced. It was too bad, really. He had wanted to put on a better first exhibition for his new teammate. 19. Are you completely invulnerable or some shit? Hexcellent had been largely silent after they had calmed the civilians and let a DVA cleanup team grab the robot scrap. She'd mostly just been skimming her phone and throwing occasional furtive glances his way until they had hopped into the town car waiting to take them to their next destination. No one is truly invulnerable. Owen told her how many times had he used those words, not only to fans or interviewers, but to upcoming supers who hadn't yet learned how important a lesson that was. Yeah, you say that, but those robo-douches were wailing on you the whole time you had them, and one hit you full force with lasers that could tear through concrete and steel. That seems pretty invulnerable to me. I never said I wasn't tough. That's part of my power. Invulnerable implies beyond all means of injury. And no one has that ability, no matter who you are, no matter how strong your power. We all have a weakness. Owen paused for a moment and considered her words. Wait, how do you know what their lasers could do? Hexcellent waved her phone, which was really no more than a big screen, in his face. It's all over the web. Those things did a shitload of damage before heroes got there, and even then managed to put a few out of the fight. You went through them like typhoid through zone. Owen scrunched his brow in response. All right, you haven't been here for Pan-Asian cuisine night. Just be glad we all have our own bathrooms. Also, the point was that you fucking wrecked them. I had the benefit of knowledge on my side. The others went in blind, but I got to know what they could and couldn't do. That let me tackle them efficiently without having to worry about them secretly being explosive or having enough firepower to bring me down. First response is always the hardest, most dangerous work, Owen explained. Yeah, I get it. Humility, politeness, and blah blah blah. Did they at least get all of those things? They did. When Owen had told Dispatch about bringing his down, she'd updated him on the rest of the threat. The second wave had been smaller and less organized than the first. By the time a crew was picking up the remains of his fight, the rest had already been terminated. What do you think they wanted anyway? To rob the food court? Honestly, I think they were a test run, Owen replied. Wait, that was a fucking beta trial. It's my theory. Owen glanced out the window, marveling at how quickly they'd gotten the messes cleaned up and traffic flowing. Those things were strong, but they had some serious design flaws. Add in the lack of a clear objective, and it points to someone seeing how his first batch of bots stacked up against the town's heroes. You'd be surprised how many tech genius supers use the exact same opening gambit. Oh, or what if the robots sprang to life and got away from him? They surged out of the laboratory, hell bent on destruction of the human world. Titan, you may have just helped stop the robot apocalypse. Excellent reached over and patted him on the head stretching her long arms to their limit. Good boy, you just pretty much drift along in your own world, don't you? I'm a quasi-celebrity. I think we can both agree that's my right. Excellent stopped patting as the town car whispered up to a curb. Before she could reach the handle, the door swung open and a hand literally covered in tattoos reached in. It delicately took Hexen's hand and helped pull her out of the vehicle. As Owen emerged on his own side, he surfaced to see Hexen lip-locked with a man whose bald head and face were nearly as tattooed as his hands. After a kiss long enough to register as uncomfortable for all bystanders, the two finally parted. What kept you? The tattooed man had a slightly southern twang to his voice, the sort of lingering accent that belonged to people who tried to remove it from their voice. Owen might not have noticed it, but his time with his ex-wife Sally and her South Texas family had trained him to pick up on the vibrations. Robots causing traffic, she replied. Excellent turned around and pointed at Owen. This big bastard is Titan, our team's new hero liaison on Titan. This is Spider, my boyfriend. Pleasure to meet you. Spider walked around the car and grabbed Owen's vast hand. In an enthusiastic shake, the hero was a bit taken back at how friendly this man, who looked like an advertisement for biker gangs, was being. Excellent seemed to read the expression on his face even through the mask. She explained, Spider is a guitarist for a hardcore metal band. Don't let the look fool you, he's actually a fucking softie. But let's keep that between us. Image and all to consider. I'm sure you understand. Spider released Owen's hand and turned back to Hexcellent. Darling, I hate to rush you, but the photographer doesn't have much time left, and we'll both catch heat if the shoot isn't done. Lucky for you, my hot ass is always camera ready. Excellent, replied Titan. You can hang out in the prep room if you want. We shouldn't be more than an hour. You to go on ahead. I'm going to take a walk, he said. I'll be here when you get out. See you then, Excellent called as they headed toward the front door of the large office building. It was wonderful meeting you, Spider added before they vanished behind the frosted glass door. As soon as they were gone, Owen turned and headed up the street. He'd seen an internet cafe on their way over, and Hexen had piqued his interest to see whatever footage was already online. Back in his day, they had to rely on the scrap footage put together from cameras sewn into the team members' costumes. Now, with a whole world watching, it would be interesting to look at an attack from so many different angles. Besides, his experience told him that this wouldn't be the last rampage of robots from whatever low-rent techie had cobbled them together. Best to see as much as he could and be ready for next time. If these things had really brought other heroes down, Owen had a feeling he would be called in a lot sooner. When they resurfaced when Hexen emerged from her photo shoot, Owen was already waiting by the town car. Despite his best efforts at the internet cafe, he hadn't been able to pull up much more than he'd learned from dispatch. The civilian videos and pictures seemed to capture a few interesting moments of the robots fighting heroes, but nothing that gave him information on their abilities beyond what he'd experienced personally. Of course, that didn't mean such video didn't exist, only that it wasn't easily discoverable despite the advances in technology. Since he left the life, he suspected the DBA's attitude on showing the public confidential information hadn't changed. Sorry, we ran over, Excellent said, sliding into her seat. That photographer was a shit show, had me changing outfits every 5 minutes and getting into impossible positions. If she weren't so damn good, I'd have told her to fuck off like 20 times. Don't worry about it, I found a way to kill time. Let me take a shot in the dark. You spent it trying to learn more about those bots you fought. Excellent flashed him a cocky grin as the town car began the drive back to the Morton Holdings office. Am I that obvious? Obvious seems like a mean way to put it. How about we say dedicated? Hexen pulled her phone out and began checking mail and messages. You've been with us for a few days now, and I've only seen you really light up to times when you were pulling that fire girl from the building, and when you were tearing those scrap heaps new metalish holes after you darted off as soon as we left the car. It didn't take a lot to figure out what was up. You're pretty observant, Owen replied, glancing at her out of the side of his eye. Smart, determined, not shy about confrontation, and with an ability that showed strong potential. The more time he spent with Hexen, the more she seemed like a candidate for the HCP. It was certainly possible she'd rejected that sort of life, preferring the more pacifistic work of being on a peer's team. but he had trouble buying such an idea. The girl had a streak of grit and violence running through her, a trait like that usually led to a job where it could be expressed. Let's not get heavy on the compliments. Like I said, you didn't really make it hard. Hexalon's eyes widened a touch as she stared into the depths of her phone screen. Say, when you were researching, did you notice anything interesting about the fight at the mall? I didn't. Look it up, Owen said. Since I was there for all of it, there wasn't anything I needed to know. I figured the time was better spent reading up on the first wave of attacks. That explains it. Excellent put her phone away and tried to keep a straight face, though a defiant smirk kept worming its way across her mouth. Going to tell me what's so funny? Hell fucking no, you can wait until we get back to the penthouse. This is too good to spoil. Owen considered pressing the subject, but thought better of it. Excellent was willful and stubborn. She demonstrated that since he first arrived. If she thought it was more fun to wait, then that is exactly what she would do. Besides, the day had gone pretty well. May as well let it end on whatever positive note she had in mind. Hours later, he would look back on that naivety with the clarity of hindsight and wonder when, in his absence, he'd allowed himself to get so stupid. Lenny popped an antacid as he watched Gail walk over to him. Though her costume wasn't especially sexualized, the woman had a certain appeal that no amount of clothing could bury. In his younger years, when libido was able to fight with bottom lines and ethics, Lenny had tried to woo a few female heroes. He'd even pulled it off a couple of times, but it never ended well. He was as married to his job as any of them, and when that was the case, the pressure got to be too much for a romantic relationship to bear. Still, seeing Gail stride across the conference room in Elemental Fury's headquarters made him wish just a little that he was still young and dumb enough to swing for the fences. Gail, you look lovely as always. Lenny rose from the serviceable chair he'd been sitting in, taking her hand and shaking it firmly. While some female heroes liked a warm welcome and perhaps a kiss to the cheek, Gail was all business. Lenny, a pleasure to see you. Gail took her own seat, and Lenny followed suit. I apologize for making you wait. The construct attack caused our whole team to be delayed. Lenny waved a hand through the air like he was trying to smack an invisible fly. Please, it's nothing. When you work with heroes, you learn to write your appointments in pencil. There are far more important things out there than me. I'm just thankful you were willing to take this meeting at all. Birds, man, and granite hold you in high esteem, Gail said. The barest traces of a smile crested her lips. Though I must admit, my own agent cursed you from here to the heavens when I told him I was taking a meeting with you. Mick's a solid guy, but he knows how to hold a grudge. Ever since a few of his listers decided to come over to my camp, he's been convinced I'm out to steal every client he's got. And is that what brings you here today? Gail asked. If I thought I had a shot at pulling it off, you'd better believe I'd try. And will you? Lenny admitted. But I do my research, and that means I know you're the loyal type. So long as Mick does right by you, you're going to stay with him. Of course, if he ever fails in that regard, expect to get some very nice wine with my card attached. At least you're honest about your intentions. Shall we get down to the business of why you've come here? Then gladly. Lenny shifted slightly in his seat. The chairs were made for tall, powerful people and didn't accommodate his small and round frame as adequately. I'm here about you requesting to do an ability assessment with one of my clients. Haven't asked any. Wait, you rep Titan? The shock on her face was easily visible even through her mask. Always have, even from the day he first stepped out of the Sizemore Tech. HCP even sent him birthday cards during what I've chosen to think of as his hiatus. I tell you, he's a good man and is out here trying to make right by the world, but I doubt you'd really take my word for it. Agents aren't exactly renowned for their truthfulness. Gail said. I take it you're here to try and talk me out of the assessment, to tell me that I should just leave Titan alone and forget about him. Talk you out of it? Why in the nine hells would I want to talk you out of it? Lenny reached for the briefcase at his side, pulling it up and slapping it on the table. Elemental Fury, the current top team in Brewster, testing out Titan, a living legend come forth from the past. People would sell their kids to see that kind of show, and not the black sheep either. Kids they really like. Gail felt herself grow suddenly uncomfortable. Despite being bigger, stronger, and overall more powerful than the bald man sitting before her, Gail had the unmistakable sensation that he was trying to make a play for control of the situation. Hero assessments are generally held in private, she said. Oh sure, when they're Real assessments, that makes total sense. But this isn't a real assessment, is it? This is a pissing match you set up so that you could try and intimidate Titan into towing the line. You don't need to deny it or defend yourself to. Me honestly, I love the idea. The only problem is that you didn't think big enough. If we're going to do this, we're going to make it profitable. Lenny pulled out a stack of papers and shoved them over to Gale. Basic contracts regarding filming and distribution rights of the event. Show them to Mick. But even he'll admit I gave you a damn fair shake. Once you've signed, we'll get the scheduling worked out. Gale flipped through the pages, scanning paragraph after paragraph of small type and large words. Finally, she set it down and looked the short man dead in the eyes. Why are you doing this? Because you created an unfair situation, Lenny replied, snapping his briefcase shut. If the assessment is private and you make Titan look like shit, then you get what you wanted. The old dog will feel like he's not up to the life anymore if it's private, and he stomps you all. However, nothing really bad happens to you. A little wound licking and maybe some humbled egos, but nothing horrid to me. That seems like bullshit. Putting pride on the line is only a good way to gamble when both go in at equal stakes. Now with an audience, if Titan handles that assessment like a pro, you get to look like startups who can't hold a candle to the old guard. You can still call it off if you want, of course, but if you go forward with it, then it will be under my terms. Don't you mean Titan's terms? Gale asked. That big lug has no idea I'm doing this. He'll probably shit a chicken when he finds out this is me doing my job and protecting my client's interests. Lenny hopped out of his chair, briefcase clutched firmly in hand. Tell Mick to fax those over when they're ready. He knows the number. You may be the most ruthless agent I have ever spoken to. Let alone dealt with, Gale said, still a bit dumbfounded by Lenny's surprise strategy. It's also why I'm the best. Lenny pulled out a business card and set it on the table. Just in case you want to shop around for a new rep once this is over. I thought you said there'd be wine to give me a little credit here. Lenny said it's already been delivered to your room. As soon as he stepped through the door from the elevator hallway to the living room, Owen realized something was up. Granted, excellence inability to stop smirking and snickering throughout the entire drive back had clued him in that he was in for some sort of surprise. But seeing Mr. Green standing there with Galvan eyes nearby drove the point the rest of the way home. Oh shit, did I screw something up? Owen held the door for Hectic, who scampered through and immediately made a beeline for the large television on the other side of the room. She snatched up the remote from Zone, who was sitting next to Bubble, as she surfed the web on a slim tablet not at all galvanized. Quickly assured him this is something that we knew would happen eventually. It was part of the package when we chose you to fill the role of our hero liaison. While that is true, we also had planned a nice, well-framed release of the information, specially designed to cast you in a positive, crowd-tested sentiment. Mr. Green added he wasn't angry. Men like him were too proper to ever get angry. Instead, he was put out a careful combination of annoyance, discontent, and resolve. Owen had known a lot of people like Green in his life, and he'd prefer someone who called him a fucker and took a swing at him far above people who got put out. Could someone at least tell me what I'm in trouble for? You're not in trouble, dumbass. You're just not our little secret anymore. Hexant made this announcement just before she drilled her finger into the television's volume button, filling the room with crystal clear sound from expensive surround sound speakers, which were cleaned up less than an hour later. Neither Elemental Fury nor Shifter's Assembly were able to be reached for comment. If you're just joining us today in downtown Brewster, several automated robots attempted to carve a path of destruction before being thwarted by several of our local hero teams. Later tonight, our team will tell you what this most recent uptick in violence will mean for your weekend. And related news, the most surprising part of today's attack was not the robots themselves, but who appeared to help stop them. The picture on the television switched from the anchor with perfectly sprayed hair and unnervingly white teeth to shaky footage clearly taken by someone with a cell phone. It only took Owen a glance to recognize what was happening on the film. It wasn't hard to remember. After all, he'd been there only a couple of hours ago. Sources have confirmed that the man in the picture is in fact Titan, a hero formerly associated with the Chicago area and known for both his strength and the scandal that drove him out of the public eye over a decade ago. Already people are having powerful reactions to his reappearance. Let's go to Janice. Excellent. Hit mute, then turn to Owen. Seems you still look enough like yourself to get recognized. Owen allowed himself a brief moment's chuckle. I bet that kid from the store opening is pissed he didn't grab an autograph. I'm glad you find this so amusing, because your little escapade has torched our entire plan for announcing your new position and controlling the spin of the story. Mr. Green snapped. Dozens of carefully planned focus group tested events and promotions, all rendered useless because you couldn't stop yourself from punching some robots. Hang on now, are you trying to give me shit for doing my job? Hero liaisons are still heroes. We have responsibilities to the public. I'll say I'm sorry that this made controlling your precious image harder, but if you're waiting for me to apologize for stopping threats to innocent people and property, then you better have a toilet and a novel handy, cause it'll be a while no one is upset with you for stopping those things. Galvanized said hurriedly stepping in. Mr. Green just wishes you'd told us as soon as it happened so he could have got ahead of the story. It's my fault as much as anyone's. I should have briefed you on that policy before you and Hexant went out this morning. It just didn't occur to me that anything would happen. Are you kidding? Zone said from the couch. How could it not once he was away from us? I bet Titan couldn't wait to get the cameras on him. He probably called in favors specifically to have them routed to him all so he could play big bad hero for the cam. Oh, the last bit came as Hectic took the remote still clutched in her hand and brought it down on Zone's well-gelled head. It struck so hard that the back flew open and one of the batteries popped out. Cut the fucking temper tantrum. Zone, he didn't do shit. Titan came with me, stayed properly to the sidelines, and minded his manners the entire day. The only reason he took on those robots is because they were literally coming right for us. I've watched videos of what those things did to downtown, and if he hadn't hung around to tear them up, that mall would be in pieces, and at least some people would be dead. Even at that, he still took the time to try and get me away to safety before fucking those things up. Be a pissy bitch all you want about real shit, but there was a situation that needed handling and Titan handled it. End of story. For a moment the air between the two teammates grew very tense. There was a second, a very long and dangerous second, when Owen thought Zone was legitimately going to take a swing at Hexlant. Thankfully the moment passed and Zone leaned back into the couch, a sour expression on his face, but otherwise silent right then. Since I've already spoken with the DVA and they confirmed that you were pulled in out of necessity, you didn't violate any protocol with your actions. Mr. Green didn't need to add the this time to his statement. His tone already implied it perfectly. Please do a better job of keeping us in the loop in the future, though I'd like to remind you that it isn't just our precious image that I'm here to manage, it's yours as well. Appreciate the concern, but I already pay someone for that, and I'm sure he's just as good as an entire staff of trained and experienced public relations professionals. Mr. Green scoffed. Regardless, you need to tell us when these incidents happen, especially when one of our people is on the scene with you. Owen bit back his planned retort, a very graphic description of what Green could do to his public relations professionals, and made himself calm down while Owen was the new guy and couldn't be held to accountable for not calling things in. Hexlant didn't have his excuse or his level of fame. Making waves might end up with her head going below water, and he wouldn't be responsible for that. I'm sorry I didn't call it in, Owen said slowly. In the future, I'll make sure to report these sorts of things as soon as they happen. That's all I wanted to hear. Mr. Green said, now go fill out an incident report. I have damage control to do. Owen just nodded. He didn't trust his tongue with the freedom to speak. Owen had barely finished filling out the incident report when he heard a soft knock on his bedroom door. After no one immediately came through, he realized the person on the other side was waiting for permission, not announcing their entry. These kids were a lot better about personal space than his first hero team had been, though given the way some of them got along, that might have been out of necessity. Come in. The door opened and Galvanized stepped through, already suited up in full costume. Titan, we've got some work to do. No voice over the speaker this time. Mr. Green only uses the emergency alert system when we have assignments of a time-sensitive nature. Galvanize explained, today we're going downtown to help with the cleanup efforts. No one is in immediate danger. Why would we go help with cleanup? There's already People for that collateral damage from fights between supers was a constant issue in any major city, even with heroes doing their best to keep situations contained. Decades ago, some enterprising people with useful abilities had recognized that this situation had the potential for profit and founded companies specifically to handle the cleanup with a few supers whose talents lent themselves to quickly moving or fixing rubble, and a teleporter who had decent range. Anyone could land contracts with a city to fix what the supers broke. They handle the large-scale issues, clearing streets and making sure no buildings come crashing down. There's still a lot left to do after a conflict like what we saw today. Streets to sweep, glass to clear, small repairs to be made, that sort of thing. The cleaners are there to make sure the city stays up and running. They're far less concerned with helping everyone impacted by a battle. Well, that seems like a lot of bullshit to me, Owen said. I thought the city paid them to take care of everyone. Some services do exactly that, but they also charge more for it. Brewster's mayor and city council decided to use companies that get the bulk of the work done and let the citizens handle the small stuff on their own. Owen let out a sigh and got up from his chair. Once upon a time, that sort of thing would have set him off on a tirade, but he was too old and too jaded to get worked up over it now. Government officials were always going to find ways to move money from essential services to things they thought were more worthwhile, usually their own pockets. Heroes might be able to lift buildings and defy gravity, but no one could keep greedy, self-serving shitheads out of government. Some things were simply too impossible. How long do I have to change? 15 minutes. We're meeting in the garage again. Gotcha. I can be there in 5. Owen grabbed the papers off his small desk and walked over to Galvanize, thrusting them toward the younger man. Here's my report about the robots. I think it'll get Green off my ass. Mr. Green is just worried about the team, Galvanized assured him. He took the papers from Owen and gave them a quick scan. But speaking of Mr. Green, I feel it only appropriate to warn you that there will be a very large media presence when we get downtown. He wants you out in the limelight under the company's approved plan. Of course he does. Owen shook his head. It was becoming more and more apparent that Green was going to be a problem. It wasn't an issue when he pulled this crap in regards to Owen's heroic liaison duties, but if he got uppity every time Titan was seen doing heroic work, then they were going to quickly come to an impasse. Don't worry about me and the cameras I use to deal with them all the time. Are you guys going to be okay? Though there's going to be some people mighty pissed off that your hero liaison is me. Galvanized smiled, showing the perfect rows of bleached white teeth that were both impressive and unnatural. Oh no, you mean people might not think that highly of us? We might become the butt of the super community's jokes or treated like a bunch of loser wannabes. How on earth would we ever handle something like that? Personally, I can't even get out of bed in the morning unless I'm roused by screaming fans outside my window. Okay, smartass, you made your point. I guess being associated with me won't be that bad. I'm sure we'll still catch a fair amount of crap, Galvanized said, tucking Owen's report under his arm. We're just used to muddling through it. Being a copy isn't a glamorous life, despite what the companies are hoping for. But at the end of the day, we make the world a better place. No amount of people being jerks or looking down on us can take that away. I'm sure I don't have to explain that to a hero. I've known a few who could have benefited from hearing that. Owen replied, I'll be down in the garage in a few minutes. Just need to change into a shirt that doesn't have robot laser scorch marks. And here, I didn't take you for the vain type. Like I said, I used to do this a lot. What we have today is an unveiling, and you always go to those looking your best. Oh, and sad, as my agent told me back when I started. You want to look clean, put together, and ready for anything. You want to make the regular people fall in love and the criminals shit their pants. Always be bigger than life. Sounds as though your agent and Mr. Green would get along. Yeah, I sort of doubt that. Owen replied, well, do whatever you need to do. Just be ready to go soon. All media attention aside, there really is work to be done. Galvanized took Owen's report and headed out the door, leaving the large man to change. Owen walked over to his closet and pulled it open. He still had 4 unmarred Titan shirts left. The things were durable as all hell. But no one doing hero work could keep an outfit clean for long. One of the first things a hero learned to budget for was all the new costumes they would need. He'd thought 6 would be enough to last him a while. But between Alexandria's flames and the robot's lasers, his shirts were dropping fast. Tonight he'd call Lenny and see about getting hooked up. With a new distributor in the meantime, he had rubble to clear and cameras to greet despite Galvaniz's warnings. There wasn't an enormous media presence when the giant SUV pulled to a stop on a slightly cracked downtown street. In fact, there were fewer reporters than people in costumes. Many of the latter had trash cans and brooms positioned near them. Owen recognized a couple of people from the recent research he'd done about Brewster's current lineup. Being caught off guard by Gale had been quite the wake-up call, and was surprised to realize there were actual heroes involved in the efforts, and not just other corpies. He wondered if Chicago had been worked by cleaners who handled the little stuff, or if he'd just been too caught up in the action part of the job to realize there were people in need even after the fighting was done. Though there were fewer reporters than Owen had been expecting, it seemed that those who were present really had been waiting for him. No sooner had his giant boots touched down on the broken pavement than a flurry of people with inhumanly perfect skin and professionally tailored outfits descended on him. It was like being attacked by department store mannequins. One held up a single hand, and they halted their charge, though it didn't keep their voices from ringing out. "Titan, is it true you're really the original Titan and not a legacy? What hero team are you looking to work with? Have you come here to be a solo hero? Is there any truth to the rumors that you're still involved with Tower?" Owen's fist tightened at that last one, a gesture he purposely hid by shifting his hand down to his side. Things hadn't gone well for Colby or Tower as the world knew him after they'd been caught. To hear his name come out of the mouths of one of the same sort of media vultures that had helped tear him down, it was a good thing. Owen had learned a lot about self-control in his time away from the life. "I'm the real Titan, the one and only with all the good and bad that brings with it," he told them. "I've decided to come out of retirement, and Brewster seemed like a great town to work in. As for hero teams, I won't be needing one of those, nor am I truly working solo. I'm proud to be working as the hero liaison for the fine peers group you see around me now. If that settled everyone's questions, we really should start helping clean up all this broken glass." One of the reporters, the same one who'd asked about Tower, broke away from the group, getting in so close that Owen could smell the recently chewed mints on the man's breath. "Titan, what about the rumors that you and Tower have? You're new to this job, right?" Owen stared down at him, doing his best to keep his face impassive. "That's right, I'm Kip Sterling of the Brewster Evening Edition. The hardest hitting. I guess either your production team doesn't like you, or they thought it would be a good initiation prank to keep you in the dark." Owen gently spun the man around and pointed to the other reporters, who were maintaining a safe distance from everyone in a costume. "See how none of them kept pressing things once I told them we were done, or even kept coming forward when I held up my hand? Why do you think you were the only one to rush over? Because Brewster Evening wrong? Because when a hero is on any kind of duty, the press is only allowed to be as close as we say they can be. Just like cops don't let you into active crime scenes or dangerous situations, heroes have to be able to work without worrying about innocent people getting hurt. But that's only for when there's an actual fight going on," Kip Sterling said, finally losing some of the naive luster in his piercing blue eyes. "Or for when we're doing heavy lifting, or suspect a threat isn't entirely neutralized, or that an area is unsafe for those without proper training or abilities." I can keep going, but you get the point. "Yes, this area doesn't have any robots terrorizing it. That we know of. That doesn't negate the broken glass, uneven concrete, and various bits of debris, not to mention the supers using their abilities. We all have skills and clearance that let us walk around in these sorts of places safely. You being here puts your safety at risk, and as a hero I can't very well have that." Owen patted the reporter very gently on the back. The last thing he needed was to accidentally bruise this little asshole and have that be a headline story. "Now go back to the sidelines with the others. I'll overlook the mistake this time, since I believe that's what it was. But next time be more cautious on scenes like this, unless a hero specifically gives you permission. Going where you aren't supposed to is a serious crime that will get your station heavily fined. I've seen it happen before." and they are never happy about it. Kip Sterling seemed like he was going to voice another objection, but a glance to his fellow reporters quelled his resolve. They were all shuffling about, avoiding eye contact and refusing to come any closer. Kip Sterling wasn't secure enough in this job to risk bringing down a fine on his station. The truth of the matter was that Brewster Evening Edition was a relatively new show, which was why he was trying so hard to get a sound bite for it. This also meant that if the program caused the network too much trouble, they'd have no issue canning it. Kip slunk back to the sidelines, with the others leaving Owen alone with his team. Galvanize approached as soon as the reporter was gone. I thought you said you knew how to handle reporters. That one looks like someone stole his teeth whitening trays. You're one to talk, Smiley. Besides, I think it went pretty well. I could have slapped that guy with enough fines that his station wouldn't let him mop the floors, let alone hold a microphone. Instead, I let him off with a warning and explained the situation to him. Yeah, I took no bullshit, but I did one of their own, a kindness. That sort of thing shows itself in the way they write up the stories.